Chapter 1355. At 10 in the morning, before the ticketing started, there was already a huge crowd at the venue. The atmosphere at the venue could be described as a boiling cauldron of voices. There weren't just domestic fans, there were also some who flew over from other places just to watch the Asian Cup. The media held their topics and cameras, interviewing everywhere. The scene was so lively that even security personnel were deployed. The subway entrance at that station had been blocked to the point where not even a drop of water could trickle through. Everyone had an indescribable excitement on their faces. The organizers had even invited famous cosplayers and CVs in the industry. Everyone had seen cosplayers cosplaying Almighties before. But it was the first time the fans had seen Almighties dubbing in the game. The benefits of the Asian Cup finals were simply too good to be true. Regardless of whether it was a girl or a boy, they would stick the logo of the team they supported on their faces. The temperature in Jiang City wasn't low, but it didn't affect the enthusiasm of the people. Shui Yaoyao watched the scene on the television, reaching out to stuff the milk that Coco had given her into her backpack. Yin Weiyao had prepared the milk. In his eyes, the three of them were all children. He had spoken to Feng Yi on the phone yesterday. At 10:30, the commercial car of Supreme Alliance arrived on time. Feng Yi was sitting in the front passenger seat. The first thing he asked was, "Have you eaten?" "Why yes, Uncle's girlfriend made it." Feng Shang held the milk bag in his mouth, looking refreshed. Feng Yi turned back, arching a brow at Yin Weiyao. Yin Weiyao replied calmly, "Fan?" "A fan who chased him to the internet cafe." Coco held the milk bag in his mouth. "She's quite cute and good at cooking, but I feel like she only likes Uncle. I'm so handsome, but she hasn't seen me before." Feng Yi smiled. "Did you give her a ticket?" Since he had given the team a meal, he had to at least give her a ticket. Yin Weiyao replied, "She doesn't understand the game." "A fan who doesn't understand the game?" Feng Yi wasn't trying to dig deeper, he was just trying to lighten the mood before the competition. Shui Yaoyao spoke up. "She said she's a fan of Uncle's looks." "Yes. That's why I can't accept it." Coco pointed to himself. "Look at my face and then at Uncle, I should be the one chosen." Feng Shang stammered, That's your self-perception. There's a problem." Feng Yi relaxed a little as he listened to the bickering in the car. At least everyone was in a good state. That was more important than anything else. At 12:30 p.m., the tickets were officially checked in. The length of the queue was astonishing. Tickets could be checked on both floors, but even so, the staff were so busy that they didn't even have time to drink water. After entering, they took their seats according to their seat numbers. In order to avoid chaos, the ticketing area had already been divided according to the ticket numbers. 1 million people were present at the same time. It was an unprecedented grand occasion. The crew was not in position yet. However, this did not affect the live broadcast of some media on the platform. Anything that happened at the scene could become a hot topic on a certain blog. The esports channel of a certain live streaming app even did a big follow-up report. The host was a streamer with a huge following. The competition is about to start. The Asian Cup is held every year, but this year's competition is especially popular. Almighty C, have you guessed the reason? Firstly, this year's Asian Cup is being held in our country. Many esports fans in our country are looking forward to it. After all, in the past, they had to travel to other countries to watch competitions and even the itinerary was inconvenient. Now that the Asian Cup is being held at home, the feeling and attention will definitely be different. Many of my friends from my hometown have asked me to help them find 2 tickets. Those who have played Hero would more or less want to see the Almighties that they have admired over the years. This is inseparable from their emotions. Moreover, the team representing China this year isn't Xiangnan, but Supreme Alliance. The strength of this team will leave a deeper impression. As an old man who has retired from esports, if it wasn't for my work arrangements, I would really like to go and take a look. Ah. The host seemed to have noticed something, his finger pointing at the screen. Speaking of Xiangnan, they seem to be there as well. That's normal since the competition is worth watching. The host asked, "From what Almighty C said, you seem to have a good opinion of Supreme Alliance. I'm not sure if you saw the interview this morning, but someone said that it would be extremely difficult for Supreme Alliance to win this competition." Indeed, it will be difficult. Hence, Supreme Alliance will need to go all out. If not, they might be suppressed by the Japanese. "Oh? Why do you say that? Is it because Chinamo isn't around?" The host was interested to hear the analysis from the audience. You'll understand when you watch the competition. Facing the Japanese is a very stressful task. The strength of the Japanese lies in the fact that every one of their players is outstanding. Even their trainees are comparable to some of our professional players. I'm not saying this to belittle our country or anything. Everyone knows the current situation. In terms of esports, they seem to have a natural advantage. With Yucixin and Hoshino blocking their path, no team can think calmly against them. Any strategy will be useless against the Japanese. Everyone who plays games knows how strong Hoshino's prediction skills are. Even though he isn't the captain of the Japanese, he is hailed as the god of prediction. Yucixin doesn't need to be mentioned. He is able to accurately predict a person's movements and habits after watching them play once. Only in an esports competition will you be able to see how terrifying he is. The host was taken aback. Almighty C, are you saying that even if Chinamo is here, the chances of Supreme Alliance losing are high? No, that's not what I meant. It depends on how Supreme Alliance adjusts their mental state. They are facing the gods in the eyes of many professional esports players. More or less, some people entered the industry because of their competition videos. Both Hoshino and Yucixin would have a mental breakdown if they met the two of them. Next, let's talk about Chinamo. It's still uncertain if he's participating since we didn't see him in the previous match. From the news online, he should have lost his memory. Even if he's here, he won't be as good as he used to be. That's the most worrying thing. Almighty C's analysis seems to be the case. The host paused before shouting in delight, "They are here. Supreme Alliance's car is here." Everyone turned towards the screen when they heard her voice. An expensive commercial car drove in. Everyone knew Supreme Alliance wasn't lacking in money, hence, the players were equipped with the best equipment in the industry, including the team car. When they saw the car driving in, the media surrounded it. Feng Yi was the first to come down. He was still dressed in a suit, a smile on his face. He raised his hands and stopped the media. One by one, the members of the team jumped out of the car and were escorted into the elevator by the security personnel. Even though they were separated by a screen, it was as if they could feel the tense and fiery atmosphere. The host shook his head in pity. As everyone can see, this is indeed Supreme Alliance's car. Almighty Qin isn't in the team. I'm afraid it's just as Almighty C said, Supreme Alliance will likely be suppressed by the Japanese in this match. Qin Imo didn't appear, which made the fans' hearts rise again. In reality, the most listless ones were the team members. Lin Feng was usually a chatterbox, but today he didn't say a word. He had a down jacket over his uniform and his hat was buttoned up. Honestly, he wasn't pretending to be deep, but there were too many people. It was quieter and the atmosphere wasn't right. But at this stage, Feng Yi didn't know what to say. Young Master Coco knew everyone had their own thoughts. Hence, even though he was depressed, he didn't show it. However, it was still different from before. From the entrance to the lounge, no one spoke a word during the long journey. Feng Yi knew that if he tried to stir up the atmosphere, they would definitely cooperate. But their hearts were heavy. This was similar to the year when they lost the competition and lost the chance to advance. No one wanted to speak. They were filled with sadness, disappointment, indignation, self-blame, and a series of other emotions. Perhaps it was too quiet, so Lin Feng asked, "Which lounge are we in?" "The one in front," Feng Yi replied. "Oh," Lin Feng replied. He was the first to reach it, removing his jacket as he pushed the door open. However, when Lin Feng pushed open the door, he was stunned. Even his movements froze. He wasn't hallucinating, right? Captain. Lin Feng started to suspect that he was hallucinating. But Changxing stood there with his sleeves rolled up. He was wearing a battle uniform, but he gave off an aura of abstinence. The only one who could wear a large uniform was the captain. "Why are you standing at the entrance?" As Coco spoke, he tried to push him away. Unexpectedly, after he pushed him away, he successfully became dumbfounded. But Coco wasn't the type to let his imagination run wild. He shouted for Captain while pouncing towards Qin Imo. Bo Jio reached out to push him away, a smile on her face. "Coco, even if you are a guy, please maintain a suitable distance from my boyfriend. Don't pounce on him so easily." Of course, she was the only one who could pounce on the Almighty. After Coco was pushed away, he wasn't upset. Instead, he smiled happily, showing his 2 canine teeth. "I knew Little Spade was the best. You are handsome and reliable. Bringing Captain back is a small matter. How could it be difficult for you? MMH, it's good that you understand. You don't have to say it out loud even though I like it." This was the reply of someone who had never known humility. Shui Yaoyao and Yin Wuyao, who were still standing at the entrance, couldn't help but laugh. Rao Rong's eyes lit up. He turned towards Qin Imo. Even if he had lost his memory, he should be the one to end the match. Lin Feng paused for a moment before bursting into laughter. His first reaction was to hug Little Spade's neck and caress her head. Of course, this idea he was just thinking about it, because just as he raised his hand, preparing to place it on Little Spade's shoulder, the captain's emotionless gaze landed on his face, giving off a strong sense of oppression. Lin Feng's scalp went numb. He immediately retracted his hand. Just pretend that nothing had happened. It's good that you're here. Feng Yi walked in. At this moment, the smile on his face was real. He had already prepared himself for Little Spade's absence. Unexpectedly, Little Spade wasn't the only one who came. Even young Master Qin was back. At this moment, the rock in Feng Yi's heart finally fell. After all these years, all he owed was a match like this. Because there were other people in the team, he had to consider them every time. They were supposed to be famous in international competitions, but because of the team itself, they couldn't compete at a bigger venue. If they were really implicated, in reality, it was Supreme Alliance that implicated Qin Mo. They weren't like Xiangnan, they didn't have a lot of reserve strength to use. In fact, they didn't even have the right conditions. If he had gone to Xiangnan, his godlike operation would have been known to the world. Supreme Alliance was too new and they couldn't find good players. As a result, there weren't many people who could match up with Qin Mo. He was the MVP in every match, be it against the wind or with the wind. But in the end, Supreme Alliance didn't even have the qualifications to leave the fortress. This was the portrayal of Supreme Alliance in the past. As for those with the highest points, because their teams didn't advance, they all disappeared. Even so, when all the big teams came to poach him, he didn't leave. From an assassin who came and went without a trace, he became a team control who stood under the tower. These were all sacrifices he made for Supreme Alliance. Fortunately, it was different this year. Once again, Feng Yi was thankful for Little Spade's existence. She didn't just find young Master Qin, but also the game. Perhaps others couldn't tell. He knew the sacrifices Qin Mo made and understood the best. After Little Spade appeared, he was really happy when he played the game again. Because he didn't have to worry about anything, he could use the character he was best at to compete. It was just like the first time he met him. Feng Yi believed that even without his memories, he could still amaze the audience. Lin Feng didn't think too much, he just wanted to ask one thing. Little Spade, are you okay? He left in that state yesterday and couldn't be contacted. Of course he was worried. He hadn't expected to be fed dog food. My body? I'm fine. I had a fever last night and Brother Emo took care of me the whole night, using his forehead to test my temperature. I don't think you can enjoy such gentleness. Chapter 1356. *CK. Why did he have to ask such a question? Lin Feng's lips twitched. He didn't feel like speaking anymore. It had been because of his sadness previously, but now it was because of his pain. In the future, she would capture all the people who flaunted their affection in the game and confiscate their assets. Bojiu didn't think so. When she had been in the military, she hadn't even had anyone to flaunt their affection for. Now that she finally had someone, she had to talk to her best friend, Lin Feng. Lin Feng asked, "Wait a minute, what did you say I was? Best friend?" What? Bojiu arched a brow. Lin Feng's face was fierce. I'm a man and you want me to be your best friend? Yao Yao is your best friend. Go talk to Yao Yao. It's not the same. Bojiu replied slowly, it's fun to talk to you. Doesn't your Zero like it? Another critical hit after the previous night. Zero. Zero? *CK. Is there a Zero like me? Little Spade, tell me, are you looking for a fight? That had been the Supreme Alliance's state in the past. But Lin Feng realized that a certain someone's skin was getting thicker by the day. How dare she call him a Zero? That was intolerable. Come, let's fight. Bojiu smiled, reaching out to pull him over. Her face was devilishly handsome. Anyway, I have the Almighty to help me. You can find someone to help you if you can. Lin Feng choked, grabbing his hair. After all this, you still want to flaunt your affection. Why should I fall for your tricks? What? He didn't expect his captain to care about Little Spade anymore. From the look in his eyes, it was clear that he approved of it. Moreover, his captain didn't remember them. Seriously, Lin Feng sat down, asking his teammates, can you guys tolerate it? Little Flower Lin. Coco caressed his chin, his gaze deep. I feel that being abused has something to do with one's face. Why don't you do it? I'll help you adjust and perhaps you might be able to escape the fate of being abused. Lin Feng didn't reply. Basically, he had lost all hope in life, giving him a whatever expression. Coco waved the pen in his hand, a mischievous glint in his eyes. As he drew, he said, my fan gave me this, the effect is really good. Really? It's true. *CK Coco, what did you draw for me? 1. Didn't you emphasize that you are 1? Lin Feng wanted to wipe it off, but he realized that it really couldn't be wiped off. Yun Hu reached out to stop him. It looks good. The person in the mirror had a 1 drawn on the side of his face at the corner of his eyes, making him look much younger. The atmosphere in the lounge was so relaxed that no matter what they were going to face next, they had nothing to fear. Rao Rong stood at the side, watching the scene with a slight smile. Suddenly, Lin Chintao's voice rang out. It's great that Supreme Alliance has such an atmosphere. Rao Rong tilted his head, looking at the person who was muttering to himself. He reached out and placed his hand on his naturally curled hair. You are now a member of Supreme Alliance. Hearing this, Lin Chintao paused for a moment before smiling brightly. Yeah, me too. The members of the pro teams knew that other than Xiangnan, the atmosphere before the match wouldn't be like this. In the past, the investors would shove people into the team in order to raise their popularity. They could have won the competition, but because of this, they would be exhausted. Supreme Alliance was different. It felt as though their dreams weren't just dreams anymore. He wanted to prove himself in the profession he loved. At the very least, he wanted his parents to know. He wasn't any worse than those who worked. His profession could also be respected by others. Perhaps he could understand why Almighty Yin had joined this team after his retirement. Because here, he had found the drive he had when he had first entered the industry. He wanted to wear the national flag with his teammates and stand on the champion's seat. That day had finally come. There wasn't a single person present who didn't think so. In the past year, they had been chased after, liked, spread rumors, tarnished beyond recognition, becoming a memory etched in many people's minds. Their abilities would be revealed in today's competition. Perhaps because the atmosphere was too harmonious, Qin Imo didn't seem to have any intentions of mentioning it. Hence, apart from Bo Jiu, no one in the team knew that Qin Imo had recovered his memory, much less the shoutcasters. 1:45 p.m. There were 15 minutes left before the competition officially started. At the scene, every staff member in charge of broadcasting was checking the equipment in their hands in order to avoid any problems during the live broadcast. The 3 hosts, 2 men and 1 woman, stood on the stage facing the script. Time trickled by. Therefore, the esports fans who came to watch the competition were already seated. The audience outside had been cleared. 10 minutes ago, the ticketing could no longer be checked. The atmosphere was unimaginable. 1:55 p.m. The various online gaming channels were flooded with red. After the stage control and director checked their watches, they gestured to the backstage. Voices rang out from the resting rooms of both teams. Although the language was different, the meaning was similar. He reminded all the teams that there were less than 5 minutes left before the start of the match, and asked all the teams to get into position. When the voice rang out, Lin Feng was still pointing at the number 1 on his face, asking Yun Hu if he should attack. After hearing this broadcast, everyone's expression changed in an instant. It was replaced with unprecedented seriousness. That's right, seriousness. Even Feng Shang seemed to have grown up, his features clear and distinct. Yin Weiyao paused in the act of lighting his cigarette. Rao Rong put on the wrist guard on his right hand. Bo Jiu stuffed a hand into her pocket, the corners of her lips curved upwards, clearly showing off. Just like her most commonly used hero, the devilish handsomeness that swept away everything. Qin Imo reached out to close the cabinet, turning around. His voice was calm, but it seemed to be able to shake the entire venue. Are you ready? Lin Feng's eyes were filled with shock. It was too familiar. This was the question their captain would ask them every time they went on stage. But that wasn't the end. He held onto his uniform with one hand, the other reaching out, his palm clenched into a fist. His gaze was deep, as though it could reflect everything that had happened over the years. The first time he had represented Supreme Alliance in battle. He had come this far from being a newbie. The year he had lost, he had leaned against the wall, not saying a word. Did he remember all of that? Lin Feng's eyes reddened, stretching his hand out. It was impossible for the others not to understand something that even he understood. Everyone clenched their fists together. Supreme Alliance. Chapter 1357. Swoosh. The screen opened. The director signaled for the last time. The 3 presenters glanced towards the camera. 1:58 p.m. The final countdown to the online video. Words streaked across the screen, words written by countless fans for Supreme Alliance. Some said that this group of people had all the craziness of their youth. The black coffee they had shared with their brothers. The instant noodles they had eaten together. The unforgettable first love. Even more so, the best appearance of our youth. 2018 Esports Asian Cup. There was a loud bang. Flames surged. The appearance of the presenter signified the start of the competition. Hello everyone, we meet again. I believe everyone is anxious, we are just like you, not knowing what kind of exciting competition we will be watching. Let me reiterate, this is the finals of the 2018 Esports Asian Cup. Don't change the channel, the players you want to see will be appearing soon. Come, let's start the countdown. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 1, 0. Let's welcome the first team, the Japanese. Swoosh. All the lights were focused on a single point. At the large entrance on the left, those people seemed to have walked out from the halo. It wasn't baseless to say that the Japanese were strong. Just like their aura, it was as if they were formed by nature. Yu Cixin still had long, silky black hair, but it didn't seem feminine. Instead, after he wore the tailored uniform, there was a sharpness that couldn't be ignored, just like the smile hanging on his lips. His dark aura was thick, it wasn't something to be trifled with. Hoshino stood beside him. It was obvious he was different today, his black hair tied up with a hairband, his brows like the first snow of winter, revealing his original aura. The doll-faced man stood behind, the entire lineup drawn out. Even though it wasn't their home game, the cheers for Hoshino and Yu Cixin didn't diminish. Some even stood up in agitation. It was purely out of love. On the screens, the information of every member of the Japanese team was displayed. It was enough to make the blood boil. It was because of this that people wanted to see Supreme Alliance come out. The fans clutched the support sticks in their hands so tightly they couldn't even imagine it. In that group of people, there was an auntie who didn't seem to understand what esports was. She was dressed very beautifully today, just like when she had appeared in court for her daughter. However, at that time, the light in her eyes was almost extinguished. The injustices. Who could really empathize with her? When she was in so much pain that she even wanted to end her own life, some people were still asking her to talk about her morals. She got through the darkness that she thought she would never get out of. Rather than saying that he had gained power. Or rather, when she saw the child, she felt that there was still light. Now she was sitting here watching that group of people compete. His heart was warm and so were his eyes. There were some things that she did not understand. But she understood those emotions. The young lady beside her held onto her hand and pointed. Auntie, Big Spade will be coming out from that place in a while. I wonder what she will be wearing today and if she will be wearing a dress. She wore a dress yesterday, commanding the entire battle. Her godly predictions emptied my blood. If she wears a dress today, the guy sitting next to us will definitely go crazy. Me too, I brought a Polaroid so I could take a photo of her for my friends. Regardless of what she wears, I like it. As the young lady spoke, she would laugh with her friends. Previously, they had been worried that she wouldn't understand, which was why they had sat on either side of her. Even when they had entered the stadium, they had helped her, even pointing at their own fan attire. We are all Spade fans, we are a family. Who was the one that said that the more darkness one experienced, the more warmth one would understand? They had never met before, but because of their mutual love for the same person, they would protect her wherever they went. Auntie, sit here. The young ladies would even tidy up the rubbish and place it in a bag. Those small actions were enough to see through a person's heart. It seemed like all the ladies that liked that child were like that. With that thought, she smiled. That should be the case, after all, they were that child's fans. Alright, almighties from the Japanese, we are done with the introductions. Now let's welcome our second team, Supreme Alliance. The moment the two words, Supreme Alliance, came out, countless people felt as if their hearts were being squeezed, and all their gazes were looking in the same direction. At the place where the lights were concentrated, figures could be vaguely seen walking out. All of them stood with their backs to the light, their shadows long and slender. It was probably because of the strong lighting which made it difficult to see their faces clearly. When they slowly approached and formed a line, some people suddenly froze in place. Their eyes widened, tearing up. Some of them even reached out to cover their mouths in agitation. It was all because of the tall and straight figure at the front. The wind blew against his uniform, causing it to flap loudly. He lifted his brows slightly, and all the lights seemed to rush into his eyes, dazzling to the extreme. Boss, Almighty Chin, I knew you would come back. We are all waiting for you. It wasn't known who shouted first, but with a loud swoosh, a few boys unfurled the banner in their hands, their eyes red and filled with passion. In reality, they really didn't have any hope. Even though they were indignant, he hadn't even appeared in the previous match. So many people were scolding him. They were scolding him for not being able to handle the pressure as an almighty. But they forgot that they were the ones who didn't allow him to participate. After yesterday, many of them weren't feeling good. Especially the fans of the official team. They had been waiting under his official Weibo, watching his past posts and videos that had dominated the headlines countless times. They reposted silently, hoping that he would come back. After all, Supreme Alliance without Chinemo. How could it be the real Supreme Alliance? Don't forget who had created it. It could be said that no one had the right to decide Supreme Alliance's direction. Only he had. Because of him, Supreme Alliance had been remembered by countless people that year. And because of him, Supreme Alliance hadn't been eliminated until this day. Many teams had disbanded because their members were old and had lost their value. But Supreme Alliance didn't. It was because of that person who balanced these things. Perhaps only the fans who had followed him all the way would understand. Asking a natural-born assassin to retract his edge and play a gentle team control. How much sacrifice was required? He wasn't like what the outside world said, unable to withstand the pressure. Chapter 1358. Qin Mo's appearance was an unexpected surprise. The number of views on the live stream reached its peak in a second. It wasn't just the fans who hadn't expected this. Even the reporters were caught off guard. They had no choice but to change their thoughts and turn their cameras to Supreme Alliance. Logically speaking, Feng Yi, who was good at public relations, would have given them the news beforehand. But this time, not to mention news, not even the slightest rumor was released. Hence, the people in the industry were guessing that something must have happened to Qin Mo and he wouldn't be able to participate. They hadn't expected him to appear just like that. After a moment of shock, the main director gestured to the backstage. The effect of the spotlight was magnified by one-fold. 8 screens, every single one of them showing Supreme Alliance's appearance. Behind Qin Mo stood a total of 10 players, each face familiar to everyone. Feng Shang, Coco, Lin Qintao, Rao Rong, Yin Weiyao, Lin Feng, Yunhu, Shui Yaoyao, and the youngster with silver hair. She looked like she was appearing in an esports arena for the first time, so clean and warm that it made every girl's heart race. Even though they knew her gender, the moment they saw her in the black and white uniform, with one hand in her pocket and the curve of her chin stretched, they still felt defeated. There seemed to be a faint smile on her face. The chandelier illuminated her silhouette clearly, even her pale lips seemed to glow. Whoosh! Her name appeared on the big screen, Spade Z. There was almost no need for anyone to introduce her to them. Information about her already appeared in their minds. The first Kill King of Area C had entered the enemy's camp alone. Wherever he went, not even a blade of grass grew. This was the complete Supreme Alliance. Obviously, the host's reaction was stunned. Hence, after Supreme Alliance sat down, she said, "It's so exciting, I didn't expect Almighty Qin to appear at this time. I believe the finals will be exciting. I believe the audience is just like me, we can't wait any longer. Now, may we invite all the teams to announce the lineup for the first single match." Instantly, cries of support rang out from all directions. It was as if everyone was shouting out all their enthusiasm, and even their eyes were filled with light. When Yu Cixin, who was sitting at the back of the Japanese, saw this scene, he leaned back lazily and smiled. "What's wrong? Our invincible vice-captain, do you have any good ideas to deal with Qin Mo?" "There is one." Hoshino glanced over and moved his hair aside. "Let me interact with Z more. He'll be jealous." Yu Cixin narrowed his eyes. "It's a good idea, but I don't like it. Leave Qin Mo to me, what do you think?" "How long have you been waiting for this match?" Hoshino asked in return. Yu Cixin laughed. "Will I wait for the competition? Haven't you been watching Qin Mo's video from back then?" Hoshino asked slowly. "Those who don't know might think you have feelings for him." Yu Cixin stilled, straightening his back, his eyes dimming. "Do you think my prediction is more accurate or his?" "I see." Hoshino put on his wristband. "We will be fighting as a team, you and I will be fighting as a team." Yu Cixin's smile deepened. "That's what I meant." The other members of the Japanese felt a chill at the back of their neck, wondering why their captain and vice-captain were so serious today. They were actually going to fight as a team. One had to know that the vice-captain was best at solo fights. There was a legend in the esports industry that if they met the Japanese, they could just give up on the single combat. Because with Hoshino's ability, no one would be able to surpass him. What was the point of changing to a team battle? The doll-faced youth was young and curious. Watanabe caressed his chin. Supreme Alliance will probably send their important members into the team battle, which means, before he could finish his analysis, the Japanese team's individual player appeared on the screen. 2 words: Watanabe. Watanabe's face appeared in front of everyone. He arched a brow. The host added, "All right, the Japanese have pressed the confirmation button. Let's take a look at Supreme Alliance's player, north of the Een Mountain." The two of them stood up at the same time. Watanabe's lips lifted. "Since that's the case, let me test the waters." With that, he walked up the stage, sat in front of the computer, and wore the black earpiece hanging at the side, not forgetting to glance at his fans. The shoutcasters asked, "It's rare to see such an appearance." "Indeed." The other shoutcaster added, "Honestly, I have watched many of the Japanese's competitions over the years. Under normal circumstances, Hoshino would definitely be the first to participate in such a large-scale competition. It was the same for the match against Xiangnan last year. Why is it different this year? They probably have some ulterior motives?" "Probably." The shoutcasters couldn't make sense of it either. On the other hand, there were people online who were asking why the Japanese had chosen such an appearance. Look at today's competition logically. Everyone knows that Qin Mo's memory loss is set in stone and his skills have deteriorated due to the memory loss. The Japanese have always respected their opponents, but if the opponent is too weak, honestly speaking, Almighty Hoshino wouldn't have come out. There are two considerations. One is to test the waters of Supreme Alliance and the other is to groom new singles players. As someone who used to play esports and have participated in competitions, this is my opinion. If you don't like it, don't scold me. This statement was supported by some people. For a moment it really did sound like that was the case. The passers-by shook their heads. Is that Supreme Alliance? If they had known, they would have sent Xiangnan. Last year, Almighty Hoshino was the first to participate. I don't think it's wise to make guesses, let's just watch the competition quietly. What else? I don't understand why they are still participating after losing their memory. Are they that stubborn? Look at the Japanese's attitude, they are a disgrace to the Chinese. Don't mock those who are fighting at the front lines. I don't understand their arguments, they are the ones fighting for the country, not you. Chapter 1359. Fortunately, this was a competition. The advantage of a professional competition was that once they entered the arena, they wouldn't be able to hear anything. Yin Weiyao also put on his earphones. Today he rarely smoked before the start of the competition. Everyone's gazes changed slightly from the moment he sat in the room. His face was more undisciplined than anyone else's. But when he held onto the mouse, the tilt of his face caused everyone to be attracted to his fingers. Strangely, at his age his hands should be rough. But Yin Weiyao wasn't. His hands were long and slender. It was all about his passion for esports. He had fantasized about returning one day, which was why he protected his hands subconsciously. Because he still needed them to touch the mouse and keyboard. The game's sound effects started to play. It was accompanied by the host's agitated commentary. The competition officially started. But regardless of whether it was the fans or the members of Supreme Alliance, Yin Weiyao's rising and falling hands were all in their line of sight. Watanabe isn't easy to deal with. The shoutcasters voiced their opinions during the battle. Indeed, his positioning and playing style are perfect and he is fast. With such an intense attack, he won't be able to block it if he doesn't show his true abilities. At this point, the commentator paused for a moment. Although this is only the early stages, we all know that the higher the level of a 1v1, the shorter the time it takes. A single thought can determine the winner and loser. If this situation continues, north of Een Mountain will be in danger. As though to prove the shoutcaster's words, Watanabe used a second skill, striking Yin Weiyao. Deceleration, dizziness, and a slash during the assault. The speed was so fast that everyone who was watching this scene was stunned. It's really hard to imagine that there's such a fast speed. The shoutcaster's voice deepened. This is probably the strength of a world-class team. Every single one of them isn't an ordinary person. There aren't many people in the country who can stop him. Someone asked if it was that exaggerated. Could it be that Supreme Alliance wasn't doing well, causing the standard of their teammates to drop? In reality, they didn't know how strong they were. The only one who knew was the Xiangnan team sitting in the corner of the audience seats. Luo. Mamage? Do you still remember Watanabe? How could there not be? In the double match, the two of us tried to stop him. We did manage to stop him, but we lost 2 lives. It was a 2-for-1. Although you and I won that double match, in reality we lost in terms of technique. Yeah, there were minions there and they helped us push away the opponent's crystal. Now Yin Weiyao is fighting this guy alone. No matter how I think about it, it's a little strenuous. It was indeed so. You would only be able to understand the strength of the Japanese when you really faced them. Wasn't it just a second skill? Why did Yin Weiyao look so weak? In fact, this second skill added a lot of positioning and prediction into it. The smoother the movements, the easier it was for people to overlook the details. In a high-level professional match, nothing was as simple as everyone thought it would be. If this continues, Uncle won't be able to get up in the later stages. Although Goddess Luo was a girl, she was best at analyzing the situation. Watanabe's strategy is obviously to test the waters for the Japanese. Uncle has to think of a way to make the other party reveal his true strength. Only then can we say that we have a chance of winning this duel. After all, you and I both know that when he fought with Watanabe, his abilities weren't just this. Before Goddess Luo could finish her sentence, Xiao Jing's voice rang out. He crossed his arms, his dark eyes focused on the screen. It's coming. What's coming? Before anyone could react, Yi Qin had already taken action. Watanabe suddenly launched his second wave of attacks. The defense tower was still there, it was completely unexpected. It was another second skill. Just as everyone thought Yin Weiyao was oblivious and was doomed. His right hand moved swiftly, leaving the opponent's area of control. The tower's damage landed on Watanabe's body. But that wasn't the end. Watanabe moved his mouse, wanting to use his positioning to take the first HP. Unexpectedly, in the blink of an eye, that person moved his mouse handsomely, his fingers moving up and down on the keyboard as he spun around and stabbed Watanabe. Beautiful. The shoutcaster couldn't help but exclaim. Watanabe's intelligence moved. He wanted to redirect the damage onto his opponent. Yin Weiyao wasn't a pushover either. He moved like a snake to avoid the damage. The audience's jaws dropped. But Watanabe didn't let go of this chance. And he really managed to hit his opponent. In a flash, he dashed forward again. Yin Weiyao backhanded him. The two of them hit each other at the same time. Go. The music started. Everyone saw these two words appear on the screen. North of Yin Weiyao fell backwards in a pool of blood. Even though many fans couldn't accept what they were seeing. But it was indeed the drop of blood that Yin Weiyao had given away. According to international practice. In a 1v1 PK, whoever could get the first drop of blood would be the victor. The fans didn't expect it to end so quickly. The defense tower hadn't even fallen. Why was it gone? This was the middle stage, the match hadn't even started for 20 minutes. How did it end just like that? Just as the audience sat in front of their computers, feeling that Supreme Alliance wasn't worth watching anymore and was about to give up on the competition. All of a sudden, another sound effect played. It was Watanabe. He was lying in a pool of blood too, but he was a step slower than Yin Weiyao. Watanabe hadn't expected this. Even his hand, which was holding the mouse, paused. It was in his calculations. After killing someone, he could ensure that he wouldn't die when he left the tower. Even if the other party retaliated, it would be within his control. Watanabe narrowed his eyes, glancing up at the slow-motion replay. That was when he realized that the other party wasn't just retaliating, he was also moving skillfully. He had obviously sensed his second attack and was planning to retaliate. If it wasn't for the fact that his opponent had slowed down during the turn just now, he might have been the first to be killed. Watanabe's lips twitched as though he was saying, "Interesting." It was indeed interesting. He hadn't seen such an opponent in a long time. Even in such a situation, he was still able to bring him along. Everyone's eyes widened, and even the shoutcasters felt that it was a pity at that moment. But a competition was a competition and rules were rules. Yin Weiyao was the first to fall and the first HP belonged to Watanabe. Hence, even though both parties had eliminated each other. Chapter 1360. Yin Weiyao removed his earpiece and walked down. He seemed to be in a low mood. Bojiu tiptoed, standing up with her long legs. "I'll find some time to play again online." The meaning behind his words was clear. If the 1v1 match took longer or if the format of the match was different, the final outcome would be a variable. Yin Weiyao chuckled. "Don't comfort me, I know my hand speed was a little slow." "It is indeed related to age." Bojiu smiled. "You're bullying the newbie with your slow hand speed." Yin Weiyao paused, his smile deepening. "All right, little captain, you've comforted me. There were some things that were better said out loud. The next match will be the doubles." Yin Weiyao glanced up at the screen. "Why do you think Hoshino isn't participating in the solo match?" Lin Feng leaned over. "Yes, I'm curious about that as well. The Japanese aren't an arrogant team. I'm afraid that if I lose now, I won't be able to force out their true abilities." Yin Weyao's worry wasn't unreasonable. Bojiu smiled faintly. "That won't happen." "What won't happen?" Lin Feng didn't understand. Bojo glanced at the calm Japanese and smiled. It won't be impossible to force them to use their full strength. Do you think they won't give it their all with the Almighty and me here? We're the strongest couple. Lin Feng asked, are you going to show off this? Little black suit, you're really crazy now. Bojo wasn't ashamed. Instead she was proud. With a boyfriend like the Almighty you will want to show off too. Lin Feng, for some reason he couldn't refute her. Alright, I'll be serious. Bojo broke into a smile. About why Hoshino doesn't want to fight solo. Lin Feng asked, why? Bojo smiled. Because of me, he wants to fight me during the team match. Lin Feng was helpless. I'm asking you seriously. I'm answering you seriously too. Bojo stuffed a hand into her pocket, her smile still intact. Lin Feng's mouth twitched. Who do you think will believe you? Experts are always lonely as long as you know it. Bojo turned to grab a bottle of mineral water. I can only blame myself for being too low profile. Lin Feng tilted his head and looked at Coco, who was waiting for an answer. I really want to beat her up. Team Flower, calm down, don't be rash. Even if Little Spade is more manly and handsome than you, she is still a girl. Also, the captain has been looking at you since just now. Really, you won't have an easy time fighting. Coco's last sentence made Lin Feng's back stiffen. He slowly turned his stiff neck around. The person standing behind him was none other than their captain. Lin Feng took a deep breath and didn't wait for him to speak. It seems like we have to find some time to discuss your relationship with Hoshino, student Spade Z. Even the intelligent Bojo hadn't expected the fire to spread to her. She coughed lightly. Seeing this, Lin Feng's expression instantly changed. That's right. We have to have a good talk. Chi Nemo glanced over at him. Also, student Lin Feng, don't bully my girlfriend. You have been with me for so long, you should know that I'm not a reasonable person. Lin Feng, who exactly was the bully? You should get someone else to say that you're not reasonable, Captain. Besides, it wasn't a merit. Why did you say it so casually? Wasn't there supposed to be no love in esports, only brotherhood? The captain who only doted on them had changed. The old saying was right, men were fickle. But why exactly did the Japanese set up such a setup? The shoutcasters were guessing as well. Actually, Bojo had already given the answer, but Lin Feng hadn't been bothered. Supreme Alliance's situation isn't looking good. They didn't win the single match and this will affect the competition greatly. Normally, the shoutcasters would analyze the situation from the actual situation. Perhaps that is indeed the case. What situation? When facing someone much stronger than you, humans tend to avoid it and it's hard to turn the tables. Speaking of which, Supreme Alliance hasn't decided on the duo this time. Because they aren't sure who is the safest choice. Actually, there is a pair that will definitely win if they fight now. Who? Chinamo and Spade Z. But they can't be sent out now, I understand what you're saying. Since they lost the single match, they have to win the double match. That's how much pressure they will be under. That's right, this is an important match for the Japanese. Hence they will give it their all. Even if Hoshino and Yusishin aren't participating, don't forget the other strong members in the Japanese team. Their win rate for the double match has always been above 90%. If they lose, Supreme Alliance won't have another chance. Hence, it will be a problem for Supreme Alliance to choose their members. After all, Shinamo hasn't regained his memory and Feng Yi has been the one to send out. In such a situation there are only two choices. Either Lin Feng and Yun Hu or Rao Rong and Lin Qintao. In the entire Supreme Alliance, only the four of them are suitable for the double match. Supreme Alliance is starting to choose. As expected, Lin Qintao and Rao Rong, double match. As an outsider, Feng Yi's ability to make such arrangements is impressive. But there's one thing he neglected. What is it? After all, these two joined Supreme Alliance later. Wouldn't it be safer to send Lin Feng and Yun Hu here? You have to know that a team is more reliable when it comes to teamwork. Of course, this is just my opinion. But judging from the atmosphere in Supreme Alliance, it might be different. The shoutcasters were logical. The audience was the only ones that weren't logical. But there was one situation that was right. Regardless of the competition, the final outcome would be determined. After Yin Weiyao lost the first match, people started to say that Supreme Alliance wasn't good enough. They couldn't even force the Japanese to fight with all their might. How could they hope to win? In reality, Xiangnan, who was the clearest, had the right to speak. Yin Weiyao is a scary person. Indeed. Zhao Sanpang caressed his chin. But his hand speed is a little slow. If it was in the past, Watanabe would have died. Yin Wuyao is probably the only one who doesn't have to worry about his hand speed to stop me from going forward. Goddess Luo laughed. You wouldn't dare to go forward against Qin Mo. Alright, there's also my goddess Little Spade. You don't have the dignity of a tank in front of her. My goddess is still the most handsome person in the world. I really want to be a CP with her. Wake up. Zhao Sanpeng lifted his Mithriya chin. Look, your goddess is sitting beside Qin Mo, her arm resting on the chair as though he is her man. Speaking of which, Supreme Alliance is being fed dog food every day. It's really pitiful. But ever since they entered the arena, Qin Mo hasn't participated in any battles. Will he be fine in the team battle? Goddess Luo smiled brightly. Almighty Fatty, have you forgotten? How we were wiped out by him back then. That's enough, don't talk about that. Zhao Sanpeng was serious, obviously not wanting to reminisce about that competition. Goddess Luo remembered it clearly. The three of us wiped out the entire team, leaving only Qin Mo at the Beast King's side. We thought the three of us would be able to take him away, but we knew he wasn't there to fight the Beast King. Instead, he was there to use his big move to stun the three of us with the Beast King. Then he would use his skill to teleport and jump out of the wall. After killing you, he was left with half his HP. We thought he would die, but who knew that he would jump back to the Beast King's side. With the blood-sucking knife, he used his big move to recover his HP and created the 3000 knife cutting that shocked the entire esports world. Until now, many people have tried to recreate that scene, but all of them have failed. But that was Qin Mo's peak. I know you can't forget that scene. Ever since Qin Mo's hand was injured, he hasn't been able to produce such results. Besides, he has lost his memory. I want Supreme Alliance to win just like you, but we have to consider the situation. It isn't just Supreme Alliance, even our combat ability is declining. Luo, even though I don't want to admit it, we are indeed old. Goddess Luo's fingers paused when she heard Zhao Sanpeng's words. Just as she was about to speak, a voice came from the side. Is Luo old? She's already in her 4th year, how can she not be old? The young flower is only 18 or 19 years old. Zhao Sanpeng didn't realize his big truth at all. His captain frowned. Are you comparing Luo to those people? Her hand speed is average, her positioning is average, and even her face is fake. What is there to compare? That's right. Goddess Luo smiled, her beautiful fingers supporting her chin as she looked at the person on her left. That was when Zhao Sanpeng realized that the emotions in her eyes weren't simple. It couldn't be. He had never expected that such a competition would allow him to see things that he had never thought about before. After all, Luo loved to see new male idols. Everyone thought that she liked those with tender faces. Of course, there were also guesses that she couldn't get over the competition that year and would definitely be interested in Qin Mo. No matter which guess it was. There were people online who said that they wanted to form a Xiao Luo CP, but it wasn't popular. Luo didn't seem to like their captain. But now, it seemed a little dangerous. Just as Zhao Sanpeng was still immersed in his own shock, Luo's eyes lit up. The double match had already started. Lin Shintao hadn't expected him to appear. He paused for a moment when he was putting on his earphones. He seemed to have noticed his nervousness. Rao Rong tilted his head and held the mouse with one hand. His lips were calm. Are you worried? MMH. Lin Shintao didn't deny it. He really felt like he couldn't breathe. Rao Rong looked at him, his other hand reaching over to help him adjust his earphones. I'm here, what are you worried about? Didn't you say that as long as I'm the team control, you would be able to compete without worry? Or do you not believe in my skills? Lin Shintao didn't need to look to see the face in front of him. He had waited for a year for this person to come back. A year in such a team. Even when this person came back, all his talent seemed to have been covered by a layer of dust. He had even imagined being able to participate in the Asian Cup. Even if he wasn't satisfied, he was already considering retirement. If he hadn't found him and said, "Follow me, let's compete again," he might have packed his things and returned to his hometown. His hometown was a small county town that no one knew the name of. It was impossible for the people there to accept his profession. He didn't have a platform. No matter how many fans he had, he wouldn't be able to do a large-scale live stream after he retired. It seemed to be the same in every industry. It was rare for someone to be able to come out. Other than competitions, it was more about survival. But for some reason, he didn't want to appear in front of his fans with that image. He wanted to start a live stream and earn some tips. If he was still in the team, it wasn't a big deal. But after he retired, he felt that something was wrong. Actually, no matter how much he thought about it, he couldn't hide his truest thoughts. Everyone had a dream of being a hero, regardless of gender. They wanted to stand at the most dazzling place and bring glory to the country. If that person was still by his side then, he would probably have no regrets in this life. Some people would say it out loud when they liked someone. He wouldn't because he had chosen to follow that person when he was around. You've calmed down? Rao Rong arched a brow. Lin Chintao nodded. Rao Rong chuckled, taking out his phone. You're quite slow-witted. Before the competition I have a present for you. Present? Lin Chintao was confused. Rao Rong brought up the text, showing him the screen. Uncle said he doesn't know how to send WeChat messages, so he can't send you a voice message. Lin Chintao's eyes widened in shock. When his gaze landed on the page, his eyes turned red. People from his parents' generation probably didn't know how to express themselves. But because of that it seemed more real. There were 3 messages. I heard about it from your friend. Your mom and I don't know how to operate a computer, so we got our neighbor Xiaolin to set it up. We'll get your auntie and the rest to watch your competition. Actually, we've watched your competitions in the past, but we didn't tell you about it. Son, do your best. Regardless of whether you win or lose, remember to come home after the competition. Lin Chintao gulped, turning his face away. After so many years, was he finally acknowledged by his father? My dad has a bad temper, Lin Chintao said hoarsely. Lin Chintao said in a hoarse voice, back then I insisted on competing and he told me not to go back for the rest of my life. Now. Chapter 1361. It was Supreme Alliance's double. It wasn't any team's double. Perhaps, there had been too many times when he could only stare out the window in the dead of the night. He had once felt that this was the world. But this moment it wasn't. Every single person in this arena. They had never seen the true darkness. Rao Rong was the only one who had thought he would never be able to climb back up. How much he loved his profession. How much he hated it. How he wasn't respected. How he could trample on them if he liked them. What was he fighting for? This was the question Rao Rong had asked himself the most after his father's death. Now he had found it. With a click of the mouse, the game entered and the characters were selected. Be it Supreme Alliance or the Japanese, they typed quickly. Before the shoutcaster could get a chance to explain, the 2 teams had already dashed out of the spring. Usually, a double would consist of a long-range attacker and tank support, or a team control in the middle and a jungler. From the looks of the formation, Supreme Alliance and the Japanese seemed to have the same style. The shoutcaster continued, they are all junglers, it seems like both sides are trying to end this double as soon as possible. The Japanese are trying to follow up on their victory, such a combination is suitable for the current tempo. Now, it depends on who is faster. That's right, we can see from the big screen that both assassins are farming beasts in their respective jungles. From the looks of it, the Japanese are faster. The moment the shoutcaster finished his sentence, the assassin from the Japanese went to the bushes at the bottom lane and sent out a signal to gather. He was obviously preparing for something. But what was he going to do? Just when people were still puzzled, Bo Jio tightened her grip on the mineral water in the resting area. As an assassin she was well prepared. She knew what he was going to do. He was waiting for the red buff to catch him. She watched as Lin Chintao approached on the map. 10 seconds later, the rest of them finally reacted to the situation. Everyone's eyes were wide open. Zhao Sanpeng's jaw dropped. *CK, who can dodge that? The shoutcaster isn't wrong, this match is focused on the early stages. From the looks of the lineup, it won't drag to the later stages. That means that if anyone isn't developed in the early stages, they will be useless in the later stages. The opponent has made up their mind to destroy Supreme Alliance's jungler, which is why they are using such a strategy. Honestly, if you and I were to go up, we wouldn't be able to escape unscathed. It is too targeted and purposeful, but no one has noticed it. They were separated at the start, but now they are together. This is the scariest. Goddess Luo's voice sank. Lin Chintao is indeed in danger. Everyone outside the arena was worried. Lin Chintao did not notice the danger around him as he flew past the wild zone. Everyone watched as he leaped up and hit the red buff. He was fast and his positioning was beautiful. His right hand clicked on the mouse, and his left hand's slender fingers moved up and down on the keyboard. If it wasn't for the people lying in ambush around here. No matter how you looked at it, his playing style was outstanding. But at this moment, every time people looked at him, they would worry for him. The 2 players from the Japanese were already stirring in the bushes, waiting for his HP to drop to half. It was the best time for them to pounce. Lin Chintao seemed oblivious, continuing to use the red buff. They're here. Zhao Sanpeng, who was watching the match from God's perspective, clenched his fists. On the big screen, the two people who were originally hiding in the bushes suddenly moved. First, it was a freeze control, freezing Lin Chintao on the spot. The next second, the assassin leaped forward, his big move landing on Lin Chintao. In that instant, Lin Chintao was left with a sliver of HP. Just as the Japanese were about to take the first blood, no one noticed the sudden appearance of a figure on the screen. It was Rao Rong. He made use of his teleportation ability to move. First, it was a 3 consecutive stun. The other team control in the middle lane lost 2/3 of his HP. The next moment he activated his big move. The two Japanese who were about to circle around were sucked in between them, causing them to lose their ability to move. Right at this moment, Lin Chintao, who was about to take the chance to return to the city, turned around and used his big move. In an instant, a sound effect flashed across the screen. Gyo. The first blood. Of course, that was after he killed the assassin. He wouldn't be able to escape. However, it was precisely because he had dealt with the enemy assassin that he had charged in. Rao Rong was able to kill the sorcerer from the Japanese in the next second. 1 for 2. No one had expected such an outcome. The Japanese had assumed they would take the first blood. But they had been seen through. How was that possible? Some of the audience found it unbelievable. Even the Japanese team was shocked at that moment. There was a saying in the Japanese, never use the same strategy. This meant that all their strategies were executed on the spot. In other words, even if Supreme Alliance had seen their videos, they wouldn't be able to figure out their strategy. The Japanese duo, who had never made a mistake in this aspect, narrowed their eyes. Yu Cixin chuckled. We seem to have been countered, what should we do? Hoshino glanced at the screen replying, that's normal. The doll-faced youth was confused. How was that normal? After all, when the two seniors of Japan teamed up to fight, it was never an exaggeration. He had to get to the bottom of it. Vice Captain, how is that normal? Hoshino yawned, straightening his collar. Because they neglected Rao Rong. It's best not to ambush him. Do you think he's just a mid-lane sorcerer since he's one of the leaders of the Chinese team alongside Chinemo? Since he's the best team control in China, his judgment is definitely extraordinary. Vice Captain, what do you mean? He already knew the position of the seniors? Why didn't he inform his jungler? Hoshino chuckled. The mantis stalks the cicada, unaware of the oriole behind. It's a simple proverb. But that doesn't seem right. Isn't he afraid that if his jungler had hesitated a little, things would have? Before the doll-faced youth could finish, he seemed to have understood something. Does his jungler trust him that much? Hoshino's gaze was calm. Rather than trust, it's more like familiarity. You can predict what the other party is going to do from his position. A double fight is called a double fight because of the high level of chemistry between the two players. Rao Rong is a rare team control, and similarly, Supreme Alliance's jungler is also a huge contribution. He appeared as bait and then as the finishing blow, all for this 1-for-2 exchange. The doll-faced youth didn't seem to understand Hoshino's words. It was only when the slow-motion video was played that everyone noticed his movements. In fact, it was a momentary pause as though he was waiting for a moment. As for Rao Rong, he was like an impenetrable wall. It seemed as though as long as he was around, the Japanese wouldn't be able to enter their jungler. It was just as they had said at the start. They allowed everyone to witness Supreme Alliance's double team. Even in front of the Japanese, they didn't seem inferior. Of course, it wasn't easy to win because the opponent was the Japanese. After the 1-for-2 exchange, the Japanese seemed to have figured out their strategy and quickly gained back a point. They had planned to end the battle quickly, but it dragged to the end. The match lasted for a full 40 minutes. Following that, the Japanese assumed that Lin Chintao was acting as bait again and didn't make any rash moves. Instead, they lost the best opportunity to attack. They seemed to be losing. After Yu Cixin finished speaking, he tugged on his jacket, revealing his battle uniform and his head of black hair. He stood up, his legs long and slender, the corners of his eyes arched. He was ravishing. Be it the media or the audience, they all noticed this scene. At this moment, the scene control also moved the camera to his side. It wasn't possible to see such a man in China. His silky black hair made him seem as though he had walked out of a manga. His black hair was so dark that the first thought that came to mind was that he wasn't to be trifled with. In reality, he was the most suitable person to be the big boss. It wasn't as though no one had lowered their guard against him after seeing his looks. They had wanted to kidnap him, but after that, they had attracted a nightmarish calamity. This was Yu Cixin. No one could tell just how strong he was. There were too many matches where he didn't even need to appear. Hoshino could handle it alone. But there were people who had seen his solo match. Not long ago he had finished off his opponent in 5 minutes. He hadn't even fought in the jungler, he had relied on his positioning to show off. With such a powerful fighting style, he could even predict which path his opponent would take and what they would do. Someone had once said that going up against Wuxia in a match was a one-sided slaughter. In other words, a match without Wuxia wasn't a display of the Japanese's true strength. But there weren't many who could send him out. Hence, when they saw his actions, there was an uproar in the crowd. Is my almighty going up? Oh my god. Does that mean the Japanese will lose the double? But it hasn't ended yet? Is Supreme Alliance really that strong? Can they send Almighty Xian out? There were some who were doubtful. Especially those who hadn't thought of interviewing Supreme Alliance and had specially come to the Japanese. In their minds, Dongying was undoubtedly the purpose of their trip to Wuxia. They hadn't expected Wuxia to make such a move. But the double hadn't ended and it wasn't easy to make a conclusion. But this couldn't suppress their curiosity. Mei Lin, you've interacted with the Japanese before. What do you think Wuxia's actions mean? Mei Lin was the reporter who had said that they would learn a lot from the match between Supreme Alliance and the Japanese. She laughed lightly and shrugged. Hey girls, don't make a fuss. Based on my understanding of Wuxia, he doesn't play by the rules. You should know how a genius is like. Sometimes he stands up because he's bored and wants to compete. Supreme Alliance's performance was spectacular and beyond my expectations, but it isn't possible for him to stand up. Let's continue watching and wait for the double to end. You're right. Many people agreed with this statement. The shoutcaster wasn't able to provide an answer. But not long after he finished his sentence, the game's music blasted through his ears once more. Go. Lin Chintao successfully killed one of the players in the double 3 times. The situation was clear. As the troops closed in, the Japanese's crystal shattered into a shower of silver flowers. Supreme Alliance won this double fight. It was a beautiful victory. Lin Chintao paused for a moment as if he couldn't believe it. Until the person next to him reached out again, took off his earphones and chuckled softly. Are you stupid? We won. My almighty. We really won. Lin Chintao had always been a boy. He had been under pressure for too long and now he was completely released. He pounced towards Rao Rong. Didn't you see my big move? It was so F***king exciting. With this tempo, I'll be able to crush Zhao Sanpang the next time I see him. Zhao Sanpang. What's the meaning of this? F***ck, what's the meaning of this? Besides, did the two of you have to celebrate in such a manner in front of an audience? Supreme Alliance didn't think much of it. Yin Weiyao, the man of steel, could only see the victory of this match. Everyone was overjoyed. The foreign reporters were all dumbfounded. How could they win just like that? Indeed, it wasn't a sign in the eyes of ordinary people. But winning or losing was just a matter of tempo. Even Feng Shang stuttered as he told Lin Chintao, "Wyoyo, that was too cool." Yeah. Ah. Lin Chintao was genuinely happy. Rao Rong watched him, his lips curving upwards. The more Bo Jio watched, the brighter her smile became. She seemed to have found out another secret. All right. Qin Mo stood up. His handsome face was immersed in the lights, like a sparkling diamond. He stood tall and handsome, a gust of wind blowing in, fluttering his uniform. The word Supreme Alliance floated in and his voice could be heard again. It's our turn now. Chapter 1362. In that instant, there seemed to be a strong gust of wind blowing over. It was probably due to his aura. The moment Qin Mo stood up, everyone from Supreme Alliance straightened. Everyone from Supreme Alliance straightened their backs. Their backs were straight. On the huge screen they could only see the 2 words flying behind them. From now on, the finals will officially begin. Watch carefully. Zhao Sanpang tilted his head and glanced at his captain. His expression changed as well. Indeed, they had to watch carefully regardless of the Japanese's or Supreme Alliance's style. The arrival of the team battle made everyone extremely excited. Especially when some of the female fans saw the originally gentle and lazy Hoshino bending over, removing his jacket. When he glanced up, his messy hair carried a seriousness that had never been seen before. Bo Jio smiled. When she walked over, her position was right in front of him. She stuffed one hand into her pocket as usual, but the warmth in her eyes couldn't be hidden. Hoshino looked at her and said gently, "Have you recovered?" Yesterday. Bo Jio didn't manage to finish her sentence. Before she could finish her sentence, Lin Feng covered her mouth. It was better to stop public displays of affection. It was such a serious occasion. Hoshino chuckled, finishing her sentence. Chinamo took care of you yesterday? Bojio nodded, reaching out to push Lin Feng away. Lin Feng froze. What was going on? How did he know? Wait a minute, he seemed to have asked if Little Spade had recovered? Why was he so concerned about Little Spade? F***ck, if Little Spade was a guy, he wouldn't have such wild thoughts. The audience could tell that something was amiss. Although he couldn't hear their specific voices, the two of them seemed to be talking about something. It was as if they were old friends who hadn't seen each other for many years and were reminiscing about the past. Supreme Alliance and the Japanese were going to be rivals, right? The two vice-captains looked like a family. The atmosphere between the captains was the most normal, even though they were seated so far away. They could also feel the powerful auras emanating from the two of them. Yusishin laughed, brushing past them. Your vice-captain seems to trust my vice-captain, aren't you worried? She's already mine. What's there to worry about? Chinamo glanced over casually. If you are worried, you can make Hoshino yours. But it doesn't seem possible in this lifetime. Yusi's fingers paused and his eyes narrowed. Chinamo listened to the host's arrangement for both parties to shake hands. He stretched out his hand. He was clearly going to shake hands, but because of his noble aura, it looked more like he was here to challenge the host. Please advise me. I will, Mr. Chin. The two of them did not have much sincerity in this handshake. The audience could see it. There was a barrage of comments on the internet. The organizers must be crazy to let these two shake hands. This is a serious competition. Let's be serious. Here's the dubbing. Yusishin, just watch, I'm going to crush you. Chinamo, come and try. Do you think I'm afraid of you? I'm asking you if you're right or not. It's very vivid. Grab a picture and make it into a sticker pack. What should we do? My husband and my boyfriend are fighting. Who should I help? My almighty Hoshino and Big Spade look like a CP. So cute. Facepalm. They are indeed the most harmonious vice-captains I've ever seen. Wait a minute, listen to my conjecture. Didn't someone say that almighty Hoshino didn't come out because he looked down on Supreme Alliance? But now, why do I feel like almighty Hoshino isn't looking down on Supreme Alliance? He wants to save his strength for the team battle because Supreme Alliance has almighty Chin and Big Spade. Isn't that the case? I need some time to calm down before I think about this. What if my Big Spade really has something going on with almighty Hoshino? Just as they were thinking about it, Chinamo suddenly walked towards her. After shaking hands with Yusishin, Chinamo suddenly walked towards her. He reached out, his voice calm but clear. I have something for you before the competition. What is it? There was a gift for a competition? Was it candy? Chinamo arched a brow. Reach out. Bojio did as she was told, but she didn't know what the Almighty was going to give her. Chinamo held onto her hand, a smile in his voice. Me, do you want it? Everyone? He paused for just half a second. The entire arena was in an uproar. The committee was verifying the list of participants. When they heard the commotion, they glanced at each other. Even though it was a live stream, such a scene wouldn't be broadcasted online. The countless reporters present wanted to capture this scene. But it was too late. Lin Feng was standing at the side, his expression obvious. He didn't want to let Little Spade flaunt their love, but his captain came out with such an explosive response. Such a confession. The girls in the arena were in a frenzy. Big Spade, take my almighty Chin. What a demon, my nose almost bled when almighty Chin smiled just now. Me, do you want it? I'm going crazy. Bojio was going crazy too. This was clearly against the rules. In such a public setting. She couldn't push him to the corner and kiss him. Her heart was itching. She couldn't control the smile on her face. Just as she was about to speak, the person leaned forward. If you don't want it, we can talk tonight about how many people you have confessed to. Bojio was serious. Can I not return it after I take it? Sure. Chinamo smiled again. Bojio exclaimed, her tone slow and sinister. We can't be relatives and we have a competition later. I can't do anything bad to you. Brother Imo, did you do it on purpose? Chinamo did it on purpose. But it wasn't to prevent her from doing bad things. Forget it. Anyway, she had always been slow in certain aspects. I did it on purpose. Chinamo glanced over and put on the youngster's wrist guard. Let's go, I'll give you a present after the competition. There's another one? Bojio thought about how this present was enough to make her happy for the rest of her life. What else could he give her? When little Princess Chin was young, she would never have imagined that he would give it to her personally when he grew up. At that time, she had spent so much money but he hadn't been willing to buy it. What goes around comes around. Now the good fortune was on her side. Bojo smiled wickedly. But she didn't know that Chinmo's gaze towards her had a deeper meaning. Hoshino watched the entire process and lowered his gaze. He had wanted to make Chinmo jealous. He had achieved his goal. But that person was really daring. He confessed under such circumstances. Wasn't he afraid that people would say that he was putting on a show after Supreme Alliance lost? What did you say to Z just now? Yu Cixin tilted his head. Hoshino tugged on the wrist guard. I was concerned about her body. Do you think Chinmo's memory has recovered? I can't tell. Yu Cixin smiled. His words today aren't like what he usually says. Hoshino arched a brow. What? Don't go easy on her. Yu Cixin's gaze was deep. Hoshino smiled faintly. I'm the same as you. I've been waiting for this competition for a long time. It's fun to play against Z, but I didn't have the chance previously. Alright, it's starting. He seemed to be responding to Hoshino's words. With a swoosh, the contestants were confirmed. The MC picked up the microphone. The 2018 Asian Esports Grand Final, the last team battle, officially begins. Swoosh, there was another sound. The camera panned down. The audience watched as the contestants sat in front of their computers. Chinmo sat in the middle. It was always the same during the team battle. The captain sat in the middle, making it easier for him to command. Coco, Bojo, Yunhu, and Lin Feng, the four of them sat in a row. Their long fingers landed on the keyboard at the same time. The crisp sound reverberated in the arena. To prevent the boring scene from lasting for less than a minute, the shoutcaster said, "The most anticipated match is finally here. Just now, I saw a netizen saying that Hoshino didn't appear in the previous match because of Spade Z. What do you think of the credibility of this statement?" It's hard to say. After all, from their interaction just now, they seem to know each other. Moreover, I've only seen Yu Cixin and Hoshino competing at the same time in international competitions. After listening to the commentary, Mei Lin held onto the microphone and started to express her opinion. Mei Lin held the microphone and started to express her opinion. I'm not sure if the shoutcasters have been led astray by the atmosphere in the stadium, but the disparity in strength between the two teams is too great. Yu Cixin and Hoshino are fighting at the same time, but that's only because they've always treated the competition seriously and wouldn't get carried away. Since it's the last match, they have to win beautifully. We'll be showing the live stream of the match later, mainly focusing on the Japanese. Under normal circumstances, we would believe whatever information we received. Hence, even the overseas esports fans felt that the shoutcasters weren't professional enough. Most of them wanted to see the Japanese. Supreme Alliance wasn't bad. But now Yu Cixin and Hoshino were competing. It seemed like they weren't aware of what that meant. They couldn't possibly assume that they were a match for Yu Cixin and Hoshino just because they won the double match. The comments from overseas started to increase. Most of them were talking about Supreme Alliance's shortcomings. They finally found a chance to criticize them. The keyboard warriors on the internet jumped out again. These people had a common trait. They were very saintly, covering up for all crimes and feeling that they were in the right. I've watched Supreme Alliance's competition. Isn't it just like that? There are so many dramas, there aren't so many emotions. In the past, no one dared to speak up. Some people should really see what the foreign media is saying. If they have the time, they should practice their skills. Anyway, I don't like Supreme Alliance and I can't stand watching their competition. Me too, my almighty just copied an article and didn't do anything wrong. Yet they insisted on supporting the original work. Serves them right for being so nosy. The two above are really interesting. Do they believe whatever the foreign media says? Besides, opposing copyright infringement isn't nosy. It's simple, they have a conscience but you don't. Of course, I don't expect you to have a conscience. Another fan is speaking up for Supreme Alliance. They've been slapped in the face by the foreign media yet they're still enjoying themselves. No wonder the foreigners don't like Supreme Alliance so much. Don't embarrass them. Right at this moment. The most famous director in the world suddenly uploaded a video on the internet. The video was very short, about a minute or so. I heard that this person is competing today. He's sending a computer expert that no one can match up to. This is the promotional video for this movie. One had to know how influential such a famous director was. It wasn't just in one country, it was in several continents. People clicked on the video. What came into view was a silver-haired youngster with a huge black mask on his face and a black jacket. He sat in front of the computer, his fingers moving up. The speed of his fingers was so fast that it was dazzling. He looked up casually. After conquering a system, he took off one side of his mask and played with the silver lighter with his fingertips. His handsome face slowly broke into a smile. At the bottom of the screen was a line of words. Standing in the darkness to protect the light. I am Z. Suddenly, the entire internet was about to collapse. Perhaps in China, not many people knew what this movie meant. But overseas, many movie fans knew who the director was based on to film this movie. Z, the hacker king with magical colors. It was hard to describe because of the different fields. But anyone who knew about code would know who it was. And the person who played Z was actually in Supreme Alliance. The foreign netizens blew up. No, it wasn't just the netizens. Anyone who knew anything about it could search for it and find out how to watch the competition. The comments from the foreigners came one after another. It was like a slap to the faces of those who said, "Foreigners don't like Supreme Alliance. I'm here for Z. Is my almighty called Spade Z now? What a cute nickname, it's very appropriate for Asians to be reserved. Hey bro, I'm an old fan. Let me tell you something. Z is a girl." What? That's right. Oh no. Cool. Is that all the resources? Why aren't they reporting it? What about the Chinese media? Because the external network was flooded. There were too many people who wanted to watch Supreme Alliance's upcoming competition. The supervisor immediately made an overseas call to Mei Lin. From now on, place more cameras on Supreme Alliance. Why? Mei Lin felt that the suggestion was ridiculous. Sir, you should know how many people are waiting to see the Japanese. I don't see any value in separating the cameras to a new team like Supreme Alliance. Mei Lin, I know you like the Japanese and so do I. But most of the time we have to stand in the middle. Even if there is a deviation, it can't be too much. According to the time difference, the finals should have started. Do your report properly. Chapter 1363. Work hard on your report. Mei Lin wasn't happy with Mr. Smith's last sentence, but she didn't think she was biased. Of course, the Japanese were more important compared to Supreme Alliance. A report was a report. She wanted to see what was more interesting about Supreme Alliance than the Japanese. Mei Lin held a small piece of equipment in her hands, aiming it at the seated person. This was something only the media could bring in. The image was clear. The competition had indeed started. The players from both teams chose their own in-game characters. Qin Mo was the assassin while Bo Jiu chose the ambusher. Supreme Alliance's formation isn't easy, it's too fragile. The shoutcaster made a simple analysis based on the game character. It would be better to choose a tank. You have to be tanky to deal with the Japanese. Based on previous competitions, this is the only way to deal with them. Spade Z is starting to move. Almost everyone present knew her creed. The enemy's wilderness, my home. Is she going to steal the blue buff? She can't. Indeed she couldn't. From the screen, the audience could clearly see the Japanese's middle lane and Hoshino trapping Bo Jiu in the middle, one in front and one behind. It was as though they were prepared for a counterattack. Hoshino didn't show any mercy, and the damage landed directly on her body. Spade Z's HP was dropping bit by bit. Even her movements were slowing down. She was about to be surrounded. At this moment, she lifted her rifle upwards, jumping out of the encirclement and onto the riverside. It was a close shave. The fans heaved a sigh of relief. Some of the audience saw the drawbacks. Playing the game like this is too reckless. You might even lose your first kill. I've mentioned before that Spade Z was born in the wilderness and hasn't gone through proper training. It isn't possible for her to compete in a professional match for long periods of time. After all, professional matches are about teamwork. Just watch, this weakness will be magnified when she meets the Japanese. The Japanese won't allow her to snatch any beasts and Hoshino won't allow her to do as she pleases in their wilderness. Isn't that too absolute? After all, Spade Z didn't make any major mistakes. It's true that she didn't make any mistakes, but look at her current economy. It's the lowest in the entire arena. Those who have watched her play should know that no matter what, her economy is always the highest. Only when her economy is high can she deal damage. It's been more than a minute since the start of the match. Under normal circumstances, she should have gotten up by now. If she hasn't gotten up, it can only mean that she's being suppressed by Hoshino. It seemed that it wasn't just the regular spectators who noticed this. Even the director directed the camera towards her face. She was clean and handsome. Her silver hair fell down and covered her eyes. From this angle he could only see her lower jaw. It seems like Spade Z is in a passive position. The commentator said, she used to lead the pace, but now she's completely suppressed by Hoshino. She can't even lead the pace. I can't see her expression from this position, but she should be anxious. Indeed, if she doesn't catch up, she won't be able to fight in the later stages of the match. The Japanese are as stable as ever. It isn't just stable, look at Hoshino's movement, it's too fast. If I were Spade Z, I would raise my economy first since it's too difficult to snatch anything from Hoshino's hands. It's too much of a waste of time. 4 minutes into the match. Even the regular spectators could see something. After all, the first kill they had been waiting for didn't happen. Instead, Spade Z was being suppressed. Mei Lin stood outside the arena, holding onto her equipment and occasionally giving a few explanations. She laughed lightly when she saw this. Actually, Supreme Alliance's newcomer king isn't clear about the situation. She isn't bad and should be famous in China, but against Hoshino she won't be able to use her previous playstyle. We can see that even though there isn't a single drop of HP, it's obvious that Supreme Alliance isn't in a good position. The Japanese's playstyle will seep in bit by bit, and by the time they realize it, it'll be too late because the Japanese will be controlling the pace. As Spade Z was suppressed, the atmosphere in the crowd gradually turned heavy. It wasn't normal. Zhao Sanpang couldn't sit still because he could tell that little Spade was having a hard time. Once again, Bo Jio held onto her long spear, gliding past the wilderness. Her speed was as fast as ever. She was like the wind. Why did she go there again? The spectators shook their heads. Xiao Jing was the only one who didn't speak. He sat there with a frown. From the map, the Japanese made a prediction based on Spade Z's actions. This time, the sorcerer in the middle lane hid in front of the bushes, intending to ambush Spade Z. When the fans saw this, their breaths tightened. They didn't even dare to look at the figure approaching the bushes. The people from the Japanese side were moving towards them one by one. They seemed to be forming a huge encirclement. I'm afraid the first drop of HP is going to be Supreme Alliance. The shoutcasters sounded regretful. After all, in a team battle, the first drop of HP was very important. Spade Z, the FC King, was so popular because of this reason. But now the FC King was going to be killed by the opponent. Mei Lin shook her head. I said it from the start, the difference between the two teams is too big. The foreigners felt an indescribable feeling. After all, from the promotional video, the youngster seemed to be Z's reincarnation. As expected, they couldn't trust what was produced in the movie. The movie had been edited, so it was definitely just for show. It wasn't difficult to portray an ordinary person as a computer expert in the movie. They weren't disappointed, just a little regretful. After all, they weren't esports fans. They just wanted to see how talented the youngster was in computer science. But even a hacker might not be able to become a professional gamer. But they were more sensitive to bugs in the game than ordinary people. Moreover, their operation and hand speed were much faster. Logically speaking, it shouldn't be so boring. The foreigners lost interest and were about to close the external video report. At this moment, the silhouette on the screen suddenly paused, turned around, and jumped backwards. She didn't rush forward. Instead, she retreated to her own wilderness. The three ambushers from the Japanese paused. Right at this moment, a line of words appeared on the screen. The Tyrant King had been killed by Supreme Alliance. The entire team's finances had doubled. Tyrant King? The audience looked up abruptly. When did they kill the Tyrant King? Why didn't they notice it at all? It wasn't that they didn't notice it. Spade Z moved too much. Not only was the camera following her, but the Japanese's attention was also focused on her. Hoshino and Yusi Shin were different. When he sensed something was wrong, he had already enlarged the map and was prepared to rush towards the Tyrant King. But it was too late. After Chin Mo killed the Tyrant King, he returned the skill to its original form. As his sword flashed, he took down one of the opponent's small wild monsters. The audience couldn't keep up with the rhythm of the scene. The director immediately shifted the camera, placing his tracking gaze on Chin Mo. Oh, wait a minute, look at the finances. I saw it, there isn't any change, it's still the lowest. It isn't Big Spade's finances, it's Almighty Chin's finances. *CK. So much. It isn't just that, it definitely isn't that. The Supreme Alliance's fans who were familiar with them, suddenly narrowed their eyes, trying to figure out what they hadn't thought of. Hoshino was one step ahead and typed a line of words on the public chat. You have been restraining me from the start so that Chin Mo can develop faster. I really can't let my guard down when it comes to you. Was Spade Z restraining Hoshino? How was that possible? It wasn't just the Japanese fans who felt that it didn't make sense. Even Melinda's eyes were widened. But when the camera panned to the youngster's face, she smiled, her right hand moving the mouse. Her right hand changed something and she typed blindly with one hand. "Thanks for letting me win." The audience shifted their attention to the screen. The youngster's character was buffing with red buffs. She didn't take any damage. How could she type with her free hand? But from the looks of it, she admitted that her actions weren't to snatch the opponent's wild beasts, but to restrain the Japanese's mid-beast so that Chinemo could develop faster. But it wasn't worth it. Even if Supreme Alliance got the Tyrant King, her finances doubled. F***CK, so this is the deep water pit. Once her finances doubled, Spade Z wouldn't be the lowest in the game. That wasn't all. She didn't know where she got her money from. Her finances were growing visibly. There's actually such a playstyle. The shoutcasters were in disbelief. Not developing in the early stage and catching up in the late stage? Another shoutcaster added, "Strictly speaking, this isn't the late stage, it's the early stage. It's only been 5 minutes since the start of the game. We probably thought that the disparity in strength between the two teams would be too great and the outcome would be decided in a short period of time. But from the looks of it, that isn't the case. The biggest difference between Supreme Alliance's playstyle and the usual playstyle is that the mid-beasts and the jungler would interact with each other from afar. They might not seem to be supporting each other, but they are restraining each other. For example, Spade Z's positioning just now, she could have walked through the bushes to hide her tracks. As a FC King, she wouldn't be so clueless. I'm sure you're in the same state as me, wondering why they were moving in such a way, since it would be easy for the Japanese to predict their movements. But after Chinemo killed the Tyrant King, I finally understood why she was moving in such a manner. She used herself as bait to attract the Japanese's attention. It was a beautiful diversion. Mei Lin listened to the shoutcaster, feeling that it was nonsense. How could two players be able to work together from the east and west ends of the map? It should be a coincidence. Mei Lin held onto the microphone, smiling at the equipment. It seems like Supreme Alliance's luck isn't bad today. After all, they are competing in their own country. But I believe the same method won't work twice. Indeed. Even the shoutcaster noticed the problem. It is worth mentioning that the moment Spade was about to stop, Hoshino and Yusishin had already headed towards the Tyrant King. This means that the method didn't manage to confuse the Japanese. Chinemo was able to successfully kill the Tyrant King due to luck. This time the Japanese are probably going to show their might. The moment the shoutcaster finished his sentence, the two players who didn't manage to snatch the Tyrant King headed towards Supreme Alliance's wilderness. They took away the blue buff from Supreme Alliance's wilderness in a few moves. Coco glanced at the map. His first reaction was to head over. But to his surprise, the moment he took a step forward, another person appeared on the other side. It was Yusishin's command to gather and attack. Coco was trapped in the middle. With such a distance, everyone was far away. Supreme Alliance's middle lane is in danger. The moment this thought flashed through everyone's mind, a heart-shaking sound effect rang in his ears. Go. The first drop of blood. It landed on Yusishin's body. On the other hand, Coco fell back to the ground. He had indeed returned to the bottom of the tower, but Hoshino's last hit was too timely. The speed reduction effect caused him to die under Yusishin's knife even after he returned to the defense tower. First kill. First kill. The fans at the venue were all exclaiming, "That's insane. F***CK, what kind of positioning was that? He managed to hit it even after returning to the tower? Almighty 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 is finally awake, he's not sleeping anymore. Who can resist such amazing coordination?" Supreme Alliance is in trouble. They had indeed taken down the Tyrant King, but they had lost a head. That was a loss. Bojio deleted the words she had typed and continued heading towards the bottom lane. She was aiming for the creeps on the way. Coco wanted to say something, but Chinemo was one step ahead. Of him. "I don't think you need my guidance." Coco stilled. "Help me defend the middle lane," Chinemo said, holding his long sword as he dashed forward. "Remember, the competition has just begun." Coco remained silent. The shoutcaster gave the most professional evaluation. The Japanese have found a breakthrough for Supreme Alliance. "You mean Coco in the middle lane?" Chapter 1364. The shoutcaster was right. If the middle lane was lost, this game was going to be very difficult to play. What kind of team was the Japanese? They had precise calculations and excellent battle strategies. They would grab onto any loopholes, and that was the hardest part of the Japanese to deal with. If they didn't increase their energy when fighting against such a team, it would be easy for them to collapse. Supreme Alliance's strategy to deal with this crisis is extremely important. They will probably send someone to the middle lane. If that's the case, then the Japanese will really be the one leading the rhythm. But if they don't go, the middle lane will be lost and the situation will worsen. Actually, the most crucial part of the assault was the coordination between Hoshino and Yucixin. If Supreme Alliance can't find a way to break their coordination, it won't be easy for them to win either lane. Supreme Alliance is starting to make adjustments. Wait a minute, they didn't make any adjustments? The shoutcaster watched Yunhu's movements on the screen, narrowing his eyes. They probably wanted to make adjustments but received instructions to return to their original positions. What about the middle lane? The other shoutcaster frowned. After all, with such a huge problem, if Supreme Alliance didn't make any adjustments, they would always be in a passive state of being suppressed. Supreme Alliance probably hasn't thought of a good idea either. The shoutcaster glanced over at Chinemo. The captains are in charge of commanding the battle. Up until now, the Japanese didn't require any leadership. Supreme Alliance, on the other hand, has been facing too many problems. That's right, but I'm not sure what state Chinemo is in right now. I wonder if he's able to predict everything with his amnesia like he did in the past? What we can be sure of is that we are only witnessing 30% of the Japanese's and Yucixin's abilities. You can imagine how frightening their teamwork will be in the later stages of the competition. Will Chinemo be able to handle them? The shoutcaster's words were what the fans were worried about. Big Spade and Almighty Chin's long-range coordination had been spectacular. But the next second, the Japanese had taken ahead. Besides, the same method couldn't be used twice because both Yucixin and Hoshino had already guessed their plan. The Japanese were too strong. He was so strong that Lin Feng and Yunhu hadn't left his attack range. This was also another manifestation of suppression. Even under such circumstances, the strategy hadn't changed. The shoutcaster's first thought was that there was a problem with the commander. It seems like Chinemo isn't suitable for such a large-scale competition. After all, up until now he had become very conforming and was not like his past self at all. The shoutcaster turned towards the big screen. The director gave a close-up shot of the white figure that was still fighting the beasts in the wilderness. That was Chinmo's in-game character, his clothes fluttering in the wind, his long sword in hand. The speed of the jungler surprised the shoutcasters. It was not easy to have such a fast hand speed after amnesia. But this match wasn't about hand speed. It was about whose prediction was more accurate and who made fewer mistakes. I've never seen Supreme Alliance play in such a manner. This sentence was said by a fan sitting in the audience. I feel like I'm completely suppressed. Yes, it wasn't just Coco. Lin Feng, Yunhu, and even Chinemo and Bojio gave off such a feeling. When Chinemo was fighting in the wilderness, they would intentionally harass him. Firstly, it was to prevent him from developing, and secondly, it was to catch him whenever possible. Zhao Sanpeng frowned. Why didn't I think of using this method against Chinemo in the past? Xiao Jing remained silent, his gaze deepening as he watched the screen. Mei Lin made use of the gap to turn the microphone. We can see that the competition has been going on for almost 10 minutes and the Japanese are still in the upper hand. However, they aren't satisfied, continuing to press forward with their usual style. Even Supreme Alliance's jungler assassin seems to be suppressed. Wait a minute. Mei Lin seemed to have seen something. She paused abruptly as though she had expected it. It seems like Supreme Alliance is going to sacrifice the second drop of blood soon. The moment she finished her sentence, the Japanese's tank appeared beside Chinemo. The Japanese's tank walked over to Chinemo, who was using the blue buff. He sent a signal to the sorcerer hiding in the bushes. Chinemo was already retreating, but the Japanese's big move had a locking function. Chinemo was already retreating, but the person's big move had a locking function. In an instant, Chinmo's HP dropped significantly. The sorcerer from the Japanese immediately activated his freezing skill. He wanted to use this time to trap Chinemo. Everyone who played the assassin class knew that the most terrifying thing was to be controlled. Once they were controlled, they wouldn't be able to move at all. That would be the end of them. Almighty Qin is probably going to fall at his own doorstep. He was too careless, he knew the other party would rebel. The support from his teammates wasn't in place. But Almighty Qin didn't even send a signal. Did he forget how to command? Zhao Sanpeng gritted his teeth, he seemed really anxious. At this moment Xiao Jing spoke. The Japanese made a mistake. What? Zhao Sanpeng's words had just come out. On the screen, the freezing skill didn't freeze Qin Mo. It wasn't because of the sorcerer's actions. But in that instant, Qin Mo teleported with one skill and jumped back to his original position. And that original position, it was where the sorcerer was standing. Under the camera, the Japanese sorcerer's eyes widened. He had already used his flash skill when he was about to attack. Now he couldn't dodge it even if he wanted to. First, he was slowed down by the sword formation. Then there were 3 swoosh 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 swoosh. Silver-white light flashed. In just an instant he was severely injured. When everyone saw this scene, their eyes were filled with joy for the first time since the team battle. Qin Mo held the mouse with one hand, his index finger clicking quickly and crisply. From that handsome face, it was impossible to tell that he was chasing after someone. Instead, his slender and fair fingers seemed to have a sense of asceticism when they moved up and down. Xiao Jing finished his sentence. Even if Qin Mo lost his memory, the Japanese shouldn't have sent just 2 people to kill him, it would have been easy for them to fail. Are you saying that the sorcerer from the Japanese will die? That shouldn't be the case. The tank has already returned to restrain Qin Mo. He can't chase forward anymore. The sorcerer has also left Qin Mo's attack range. Next he just has to. Zhao Sanpang wasn't finished. A figure suddenly appeared on the map. She was extremely fast. It was as though the wall in front of her couldn't stop her. She moved up twice and appeared beside the sorcerer. She could still vaguely see the mark in the air. Before anyone could react, she moved her rifle from her back. 2 words appeared on the screen. Oh. When the audience saw this, they froze for a second. Then they were filled with shock. No one knew how Spade Z appeared. The audience only knew one thing. This was Supreme Alliance's first kill. The score was pulled back to a draw. The tank that came with the sorcerer could only run to the center of the defense tower. He glanced at his captain's words again. Just harass, don't attack. He admitted his mistake. It's my fault. After which, he added in annoyance. I thought he didn't notice me. Yu Cixin cleared half of Supreme Alliance's wilderness and smiled. Do you think Qin Mo will be easy to deal with after losing his memory? I told you not to have such thoughts. But it isn't a loss. Hoshino and I have cleared most of their wilderness. The beasts in the wilderness represented money. That wasn't all, the red and blue buffs had speed reduction effects. Assassins used up a lot of mana. Now that Supreme Alliance's wilderness didn't have these things, it meant that Qin Mo would be left behind. However, it was proven. It wasn't that simple. Because the Japanese's wilderness had been cleared as well? What's going on? The doll-faced Japanese was confused. The audience was even more confused as to what had happened. The director seemed to understand what everyone wanted to see. He immediately enlarged the other half of the map that Hoshino and Yu Cixin had seen when they had cleared the Japanese's wilderness. After killing the Japanese sorcerer, Spade Z hadn't returned. Instead, she had headed straight for the Japanese's wilderness. However, there was one person who was one step faster than her. That was Qin Mo. The 2 of them seemed to have guessed that they wouldn't be able to hold on to their red wilderness. Besides, there wasn't a need to chase after the tank. It was a waste of time and they wouldn't be able to kill him. The Japanese's tank had always thought that he had escaped quickly. Hence, he had only seen their shadows at the start. Then he hadn't seen them. He should have taken a look at this angle. Once he did, he would understand that Qin Mo and Bo Jio's target hadn't been him from the start. Instead, it had been the wilderness on the other side of the wall on his right. The 2 of them had great teamwork. Everywhere they went, there wasn't a single blade of grass left. Even the line of soldiers had been cut off. They watched as the 2 figures flew past. Merlin, who was reporting, paused for a moment. It was too fast. No, that wasn't right. It wasn't just fast. Be it their positioning, judgment, or when they had been clearing the wilderness. The 2 figures were slender and reckless. They didn't seem to know what fear was. Weren't they afraid? They were going up against the Japanese. Besides, even if they managed to turn the score around, they had been suppressed the entire time. Chapter 1365. Mei Lin couldn't figure it out. But the shoutcasters could see it clearly. It seems like compared to Yu Cixin and Hoshino's teamwork, Qin Mo and Spade Z's teamwork is the highlight of this match. You mean to say that these 2 pairs are equally matched? No, there is a difference. Take a look at Supreme Alliance's bottom lane and you will understand. After the shoutcaster's words, everyone focused their attention on the bottom lane. When did Hoshino come here? It wasn't just Hoshino, Yu Cixin was here too. Were they sure that their wild zones were gone? If not, they should be clearing the troops in the jungle. But they suddenly appeared at the bottom lane at the speed of light. Without any hesitation, he used attack rush and dealt damage to Lin Feng, who was still clearing the creeps. Yun, who wanted to go forward to help. But the next moment, Yu Cixin marked the damage. Lin Feng was rooted to the ground. He didn't have any time to retaliate. He held the keyboard in his right hand while his left hand moved up and down. He wanted to use his positioning to avoid the opponent's attack. Lin Feng did it, and Yun, who went forward to block the attack for him. He thought he could leave after entering the tower, but the Japanese's troops attacked at this moment. Moreover, the opponent's long-range attacker was there too. Hoshino didn't hesitate. He held the crescent long knife and leaped into the tower. The knife light fell, sucking in and retracting, causing Lin Feng's HP to drop. Then he slashed again. At the same time, he leaped out of the defense tower's attack range. The silver light could be seen clearly on the screen. No one would have guessed that Hoshino was the one who had such a sharp positioning and attack. After all, his aura was there. But the fans who were familiar with him weren't surprised. Even before the game's sound effect came, they already knew the outcome. They shouted loudly, "Almighty Hoshino, you are finally awake." The origin of this sentence was quite a story. Hoshino loved to sleep. He looked gentle, but in reality he was caught sleeping in the resting area 3 times before the match. But the moment he entered the arena, everything changed. Of course, if it was a very ordinary team. Their star god's playstyle was just like a human's, gentle like the spring moon dripping on the windowsill. But if the other party was also very powerful, then he would change his usual playstyle. He would be like a knight who had just woken up from a dream. Wherever he went, there would be the splendor of the moonlight. Just like the game character he used, he had a nickname, Continuous Combo Queen of the Moon. As if responding to the shouts of the fans. The score on the screen immediately changed. 2:1. Lin Feng's character lay on the ground, covered in blood. The Japanese took the lead again. More importantly, it wasn't over yet. The defense tower at Supreme Alliance's bottom lane was about to be breached. Yun, who wouldn't be able to withstand the attacks from the 3 of them. "We can only retreat." The shoutcaster looked at this scene and said what was on his mind. Indeed, Yun Hu retreated because if he stayed there any longer he might be taken away as well. The sound of the defense tower shattering came from the screen. The 2 shoutcasters glanced at each other. "We thought the Japanese wouldn't let go of the middle lane, but it seems like our guess wasn't accurate." "That's right, regardless of which lane it is, as long as there is a possibility of an attack, they will take it down. The Japanese can't use a fixed mindset to judge this team. This time, Supreme Alliance is in trouble. The bottom lane looks like it's going to collapse and Supreme Alliance isn't doing well at the minions." That was indeed the case. The bottom lane had always been filled with the Japanese's minions and with long-range attackers. The speed at which they attacked the defense tower would definitely be much faster. Ever since the start of the competition, I'm starting to feel that the victory of a team isn't just related to their skills, it's also closely related to their leadership. Qin Mo might not have made any major mistakes in his maneuvering, but from what I've seen so far, his leadership skills haven't been fully displayed. And it isn't hard to tell that Supreme Alliance is starting to crumble. The sorcerer in the middle lane doesn't dare to advance, which means that they are aware of the danger the moment they leave the tower. Coco's technique is second to none in the country. This kind of cautious maneuver is a reflection of his mentality. He can't afford to be killed again, so he's carefully testing his position. This isn't a good thing. The more he does this, the more likely he'll be ambushed. The shoutcaster finished his sentence. Other than the sorcerer from the Japanese side, the tank that was left with half a tank of HP walked over. But the tank walked through the bushes. It could only be seen from the perspective of the Japanese. This meant that Coco probably didn't realize that there were 2 of them. One of them was a tank with a stun skill. This meant that he would be in danger the moment he left the tower. But he didn't seem to notice it. He watched as the sorcerer made a mistake and grasped the opportunity to advance. It's a trap. I can understand why Coco wanted to catch up to them when he saw their mistake, but it's obvious that the Japanese sorcerer made a mistake on purpose. After all, how could such a low-level maneuver appear on a team like the Japanese? They were just trying to lure Coco into a trap. As though to verify the words of the high-end players, the Japanese's flustered sorcerer steadied his legs and threw a freezing skill on Coco. At this moment, the Japanese's tank jumped out from the bushes, intending to stun Coco. What no one expected was that the moment he jumped out, a figure suddenly appeared in front of him. Another figure leaped out from the bushes. Dressed in snow-white robes, he held a long sword in his hand, leaving a silver glow in his wake. With a slash of the long sword, a sword formation rose. Both the Japanese's tank and sorcerer were slowed down by the sword formation. Even though the Japanese were prepared, they weren't able to dodge this move. It was too fast. It was so fast that no one could react. But the Japanese weren't weak either. After sensing the intrusion, the Japanese's sorcerer moved nimbly to avoid Qin Mo's next attack. But to his surprise, Qin Mo wasn't attacking him. Instead, he swung his long sword. With 3 swishing sounds, each ray of silver light landed on the Japanese's tank. This was a move that no one had expected. But it was this move. It didn't just prevent Qin Mo's big move from missing. It also gave Coco the chance to cooperate with him and take one of the Japanese's heads. 2:2. The score was pulled back to a tie. There was another sound effect in the game. A defense tower on the top lane of the Japanese was destroyed. The one who destroyed the tower was none other than Spade Z, who couldn't pinpoint her whereabouts. Mei Lin watched the match. Should she say that the ignorant were fearless? Let's put it this way. For every head the Japanese took, Supreme Alliance had to return with a head. It was the same even when they pushed the tower. But in this way they would always be one step behind the Japanese. Mei Lin shook her head, her words filled with sincerity. They are always behind the Japanese to retaliate and are still being led by the Japanese. I hope Supreme Alliance will wake up soon. However, the match is still a little unexpected. According to the following situation, it will be difficult for Supreme Alliance to retaliate. Those who understand the competition should know that even though the teams have the same number of players, Supreme Alliance is clearly weaker in terms of the minions. Moreover, Supreme Alliance's long-range attackers have already died once. The Japanese's attackers are all online and they can take down the tower much faster than Supreme Alliance. That was true. Mei Lin's analysis coincided with what the shoutcaster was going to explain. But since Spade Z was above, Hoshino, who was lying in ambush at the bottom lane, had no choice but to turn and head towards his own jungle. Because of his understanding of Z. After taking down their tower. Since she wasn't leading the minions, she was definitely going to kill their jungle. He knew very well how Z carried out the sentence, "Your wilderness is my home," to the end. But some of the audience didn't understand why Hoshino didn't clear the minions. Instead, he headed towards the jungle. When the map of the jungle was zoomed in, the audience finally saw it clearly. Spade Z was clearing the second wave of the Japanese's jungle. The director pulled the camera back to Hoshino. He moved swiftly, the machete in his hand as though it was overflowing with moonlight. He could make it in time. Not only could he make it in time, but he could also trap Spade Z in the jungle. Based on the time, Spade Z should be at half HP by now. However, the next second the audience fell silent. The red buff was still in effect, but that person was nowhere to be seen. Hoshino held the machete in one hand, walking around the jungle, the blade slicing through the bushes beside the red buff. Speaking of which, this was the first time Hoshino was facing Spade Z alone. Everyone in the audience held their breath. They were guessing the outcome of this battle. Time seemed to be stretched. But it hadn't even been 2 seconds. On the screen, Hoshino suddenly moved. His blade didn't touch the bushes beside the red buff, instead he skimmed towards the river. He managed to find me even though I hid like that. Bojio curved her thin lips and leaped to the left. It seems like it's difficult to deal with someone who knows me so well. Hoshino smiled, the sharp blade in his hand and the loving smile on his face forming a stark contrast. I didn't notice it at the start because it's you. I had to think twice. The audience had never seen such a battle. How could they still have the mood to chat at such a crucial moment? Besides, they were clearly enemies. Why do I feel like there's an invisible warm atmosphere around me? But it couldn't be called warm. Chapter 1366. It was on the big screen. The audience watched as the machete was about to hit Bojio. They held their breaths. However, at this moment, Bojio flicked her long spear back. She was one step ahead of Hoshino and returned to her original position. Her speed was so fast that everyone froze. Hoshino's machete missed. This was something that had never happened before. Their battle wasn't over. After Bojio dodged the attack, she didn't have any intention of leaving. She swept her long spear and leaped over. The damage was off the charts. Hoshino moved his mouse and dodged to the right, returning with a machete. Whether it was his positioning or speed, he had amazed the crowd time and time again. Because the two people are too fast. The screen was left with the silver sparks from the collision of the machete and the long spear. Looking at that face, it was handsome in a different style. The camera zoomed in. Hoshino's fingers were moving so fast that it was almost an afterimage. Almost all the shoutcasters froze for a moment as they watched. 3 seconds later they remembered that they were supposed to explain. But even though they remembered, they were still in a dilemma as to how to explain it. Because the moment one movement was over, another movement followed. They had to slow down the video to explain. It hadn't even been 20 seconds. The movements and positioning of those two players were much more detailed than their explanations of an ordinary team battle. Moreover, there were many skillful movements that the audience wouldn't be able to understand. There were too many things. Even after watching this battle, they wanted to exclaim, "That movement was so cool." So there was such a thought behind it. The high-level players who were watching the live stream saw this scene and muttered to themselves, "They've been predicting the entire time and it's God-level prediction. These two people are a little too scary." Precise positioning meant that you were able to predict where your opponent's attacks would land. That wasn't all. At this moment they thought they would see a half HP Spade Z. But unexpectedly she had a blood-sucking equipment. She could use the damage from the beast to recover her HP. This meant that even if the skill didn't hit Hoshino, it wouldn't miss. "You're as smart as ever." Hoshino's tone was gentle. It didn't seem like a battle at all. The female fans could really use these words to create a 10,000-word story. Every chapter was about love. The two people in the duel were really too handsome. He couldn't even bear to move the camera away. However, this battle was destined to not last long. 25 seconds seemed to be the limit of the Almighty's patience. Chinmo's eyes deepened as he followed. Hoshino also saw the figure on the map. He sheathed his machete and took a step back. He hid in the bushes but did not leave. Seeing this, a light flashed across Xiao Jing's eyes. "It's starting." "What?" Zhao Sanpeng was still dizzy. In reality, only those who understood the exchange between Hoshino and Bojio would be confused. Ordinary players, on the other hand, could only see his speed. For a professional like Zhao Sanpeng, he had seen a lot of things. In the past 20 seconds, his eyes were about to drip eye drops. How did the two of them do it? It was fine if there was a non-human. Why were there so many non-humans? Most importantly, both of their faces were better looking than his. Chapter 1367. It seemed to be responding to Xiao Jing's words. The big screen immediately exploded with comments. It wasn't clear who used the big move first. The silver light fell. The tank from the Japanese shouldered the damage and spun his body, heading straight for Bojio. Bojio lifted her spear, avoiding the stun. The sorcerer from the Japanese followed, wanting to summon a freezing skill. But his speed wasn't faster than Bojio's. Just as he was about to raise his hand, Bojio swept her long spear horizontally, lifting him up. Right at this moment, Hoshino dashed over. With a suction and retraction of his machete, he fixed Bojio on the spot. With the sorcerer's attack, Bojio's HP was reduced to half. Bojio didn't panic. Instead, she held onto the mouse and dodged to the left, leaving some space. Yunhu, as a tank warrior, advanced. He had a stun skill, trapping the two Japanese players in the middle. Lin Feng followed up, his attacks landing on Hoshino's body. But at this moment, Hoshino moved in the opposite direction. He didn't chase after Bojio. Instead, he turned and trapped Lin Feng on the spot. Lin Feng was a long-range attacker and was most afraid of being attacked by an assassin at close range. Before he could say, F***, Hoshino's machete was already on his body. Lin Feng moved his finger and used extreme flash to avoid the danger of being stuck to him. But even so, he was left with low HP. Without a long-range attacker, they wouldn't be able to win this team battle. Both the spectators and the players knew this. It seems like Supreme Alliance is going to fail this time. Zhao Sanpeng listened to the explanation, his expression solemn. If Lin Feng didn't go back, he would be killed instantly. If he went back, Yunhu wouldn't be able to be saved. Even if Coco was around, his finances were the lowest and the damage wouldn't be enough. Just as he was hesitating, a voice entered his ears. He heard a voice say, "Go." Lin Feng didn't hesitate, retreating back to the tower. When the Japanese saw this, they focused all their damage on Yunhu. Just as his HP was about to drop, a white figure darted over. A white silhouette dashed in and set up an electric formation, slowing down the speed of the three Japanese. This allowed Yunhu to walk back successfully. Things weren't going to be that simple. This was what everyone was thinking. As expected, in the next second, Yu Cixin's figure appeared on the screen. He waved his mouse and darted towards Yunhu, who had low HP. The music started playing. When the audience regained their senses, Yun who was already lying on the grass. However, it was not over yet. Yes, Yu Cixin didn't stop. He sprinted towards Lin Feng with no intention of stopping. Right at this moment, Qin Mo used his second skill to shift. The direction of his shift was just enough to block Yu Cixin's attack. Was this a prediction or a coincidence? People couldn't understand what was happening. But what he could understand was that Yu Cixin's lips curled up as though he had already expected his return. Lin Feng didn't attack again. Instead, his figure blurred as he struck the ruler. Fight a ruler? No. That was obviously impossible. In the next second, people knew why he did that. At this moment, Yu Cixin seemed to have eyes at the back of his head. He knew Bo Jiu was about to throw her spear over. After pulling aggro and luring it out, it could deal earthquake-like damage. Of course, they had to bear this pain together. Regardless of whether it was Yu Cixin, Bo Jiu or Qin Mo. Even though the damage was low, it was effective in interrupting their collaboration. Losing 200 to injuring 600. This was a fair deal no matter how one looked at it. The ruler's roar was mixed with the silver light. It was a shocking scene. Mei Lin's face was filled with surprise. As expected of Yu Cixin. Supreme Alliance probably hasn't realized what kind of opponent they are facing. This person is using data to play games. Yes, accurate analysis, natural prediction, and when he was playing games his long black hair fell and there was a devilish smile that was extremely handsome. This made everyone understand one thing. The attack had just begun. That was because Hoshino was following behind him. Hoshino dashed forward at the right time. He swung his machete horizontally and the damage rushed towards Bo Jiu. At this critical moment, Coco followed over. He used his control skill to lock onto Hoshino, but Hoshino turned right and dodged it. But he did dodge Coco's skill. But Qin Mo didn't dodge. When the figure dashed over, an electric formation was set up. His speed was reduced immediately. There were 3 swoosh 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 swoosh. Yu Cixin had a bad feeling. He turned and retreated. Hoshino's gaze froze. He had expected this move but he didn't dodge it. Fortunately, the damage wasn't enough. Hoshino used the minions and moved instantly, disappearing from Qin Mo's attack range. He didn't stop moving the mouse. He attacked the wild monster and started to recover his HP. He smiled. I'm really a little scared. Are you that fierce? Yes, we are very fierce. Bo Jiu lifted her long spear. Just when everyone thought she would be hit by the attack, Hoshino suddenly moved. Unexpectedly, she lifted Yu Cixin with her long spear. The sorcerer, who had been lying in ambush in the bushes and was prepared to use his freezing skill the moment she lifted him, missed. Of course, Yu Cixin was almost at full HP. The damage wasn't fatal to him. But Bo Jiu wouldn't give up so easily. Yu Cixin guessed it. He attacked the Beast King again and successfully shook Coco, who was behind him. Then he swept past Bo Jiu and went close to Coco. Coco couldn't move at this moment. With his fragile skin, he lost half his HP in an instant. When he could move again, Yu Cixin dealt damage to the ruler, successfully enraging him and causing him to be injured. Coco dodged to the right instinctively. But the next second he knew he was in trouble. Hoshino had swept back. He had used his flash so he could only be sucked back. Next, Yu Cixin marked the damage. Even though Qin Mo had already leaped back and set up an electric formation, Coco's HP was too low and he was taken away. This team battle seemed long, but in reality, it was just 10 seconds. Once again the exciting music played in the game. Double kill. Double kill. The score suddenly became 2-4. The Japanese had a decisive lead. Bo Jiu's hands paused. She didn't move forward. The audience looked at her movements and could understand. It was obvious that Supreme Alliance no longer had the upper hand in this team battle. If they went in to start another team battle, it would be a death sentence. Chapter 1368. This was the first true team battle since the start of the match. Supreme Alliance still lost. And that wasn't all. The eyes of the high-level players lit up when they saw this scene. Some of them touched their chins. This method seems familiar. One of Qin Mo's best moves. The shoutcaster took the microphone at the right time, his tone filled with amazement. Another shoutcaster analyzed, I'm sure everyone remembers that he used this move back then. He roamed around the 3 of them, hitting the Beast King to recover his HP. He made use of the damage caused by the Beast King to calculate the dizziness caused by the Beast King's roar and successfully turn the tables in a 1v3 situation to kill the opponent. I always thought that only Almighty Qin could do such a move. Of course, there have been people who have used it to turn the tide of a match, but most of them were in 1v1 situations. For example, Supreme Alliance's newcomer Shui Yaoyao was able to do this, which is considered a high level of foresight. But if it was used in a team battle, it wouldn't just be a matter of foresight, it would require extremely precise calculations. Back then, there were people who tested it, and many people wanted to learn Qin Mo's move and use it in a team battle. Unfortunately, when you actually play the game, you will understand that it isn't that simple. Otherwise, when you attack the Beast King, you might not be able to calculate it well, and after pulling the aggro, the Beast King's attacks will all hit you. You can imagine how terrible the outcome would be. That's why until now, in so many large-scale competitions, no one has used this move in a team battle. That's right. Even Qin Mo hasn't been able to fight like this because of his wrist injury. I didn't expect to see such a scene from Yu Cixin today. The shoutcaster's voice was filled with uncertainty. Which means that Yu Cixin is using this method to tell Qin Mo that he can replicate his moves with 100% accuracy. If that's the case, things aren't looking good for Supreme Alliance. The shoutcaster's last sentence was clear. After all, Qin Mo's move had been countered by the opponent. How were Supreme Alliance going to fight in the following matches? This was fatal for Supreme Alliance. The audience wasn't stupid. Even though they hadn't been able to see the movements clearly due to the fast speed, they didn't understand the theory behind it. But after the shoutcaster's explanation, they understood completely. The anxiety in their eyes revealed all their emotions. It wasn't just them. Even Feng Yi, who was standing in the resting area, tightened his grip on his phone. Shui Yaoyao's face was pale. She had specially practiced this kind of move, so she knew very well what kind of strength it took to replicate it. Zhao Sanpeng didn't waste any more words, his expression solemn. Chapter 1369. Mei Lin wasn't wrong about that. Supreme Alliance's sense of danger seemed to be mixed in the air, so thick that even the audience could feel it. The camera focused on Qin Mo's position. On the screen he could clearly see that the character he was controlling had paused slightly in the wilderness. Such a pause had never happened in Qin Mo's previous matches. The fans were starting to worry. The shoutcaster sighed. The impact of amnesia isn't small. However, if they were to face a player like Yu Cixin, regardless of whether Qin Mo lost his memory, the chances of Supreme Alliance winning wouldn't be high. Supreme Alliance's wilderness has been cleared. This speed seems to be Spade Z's style. The Japanese have already started flying. What Supreme Alliance does next is the crux of this match. Honestly, this is the first time I'm commentating on such a competition. The actions of both teams are always unexpected. As a commentator, I'm just like the audience, anticipating an unexpected surprise from both teams. But Supreme Alliance is indeed in danger. Indeed, it isn't just because Qin Mo is suppressed. Coco has died 3 times. If he dies again, according to the rules of the team battle, he won't be able to compete anymore. Coco doesn't look too good right now. Indeed, Coco's playing style was much more restrained than at the start. The Japanese had the intention to destroy the tower, the 5 of them attacking the middle lane. Another Supreme Alliance defense tower was destroyed. That wasn't all. The news of the Tyrant King's death spread. The Japanese's finances had doubled. Hoshino held a machete in one hand, piercing through the wall. With the blue and red buff on him, his finances were the highest. This was undoubtedly one disaster after another for Supreme Alliance. It seems like the competition is ending. Mei Lin shook her head. At the start, I thought Supreme Alliance would have a different playstyle compared to the other teams. After all, there aren't many teams that can take points from the Japanese. Now it seems like I was being too optimistic. Hoshino has completely risen and Supreme Alliance won't have a chance to make a comeback. But from this match we can see that Supreme Alliance has 2 good players. For example, Supreme Alliance's double players are good and they are much stronger than their team players. Just as she spoke, another defense tower was destroyed. This time it was the tower at the bottom lane. Anyone who has played Hero would know. Sometimes, once the situation got out of hand, it would be a complete collapse and no one would be able to take care of it. It was dangerous to even leave the defense tower. Because if they were not careful, they would be instantly killed by the opponent. However, if they just stayed at the bottom of the tower, they would lose all opportunities including turning the tables. Even if he was unwilling to admit it. Supreme Alliance was beaten to the point where they couldn't retaliate. This scene had also happened last year. However, Xiangnan's luck wasn't as good as Supreme Alliance. The moment they entered the Asian Cup they met the Japanese. Because of that, they were completely defeated by the opponent. But that was the later stage of the competition. If Supreme Alliance couldn't even last until the later stage, did that mean that they were not qualified to participate in the Asian Cup? Just as this thought flashed through the audience's mind. Chapter 1370. Suddenly, someone stood up from the audience. His figure and aura were too outstanding. In an instant he attracted a lot of attention. Almighty Xiao, is he here to watch the competition? There's no way Xiangnan wouldn't be here for such a competition. That's true, but judging from Almighty Xiao's expression, he must be thinking that Supreme Alliance has lost and is leaving. Honestly, there's no way to retaliate, it's such a pity. The discussion grew louder. But Xiao Jing didn't look at them, instead, his gaze was on Qin Imo. While Qin Imo was drinking his water, he suddenly asked, Qin Imo, is Supreme Alliance going to play the Asian Cup like this? This was the first time Xiao Jing said such a thing. Regardless of whether it was a competition or an interview, Captain Xiao had always been a man of few words. The moment he spoke, Watanabe, who was seated in the Japanese's resting area, turned towards him. The shoutcasters and committee members focused their attention as well. Under normal circumstances, as long as it didn't affect the competition, they wouldn't interfere. They just hadn't expected it. The director was smart, knowing this was a highlight, hence he shifted the camera to Qin Mo's face. At this moment the audience only had one thought. The almighty Qin was still in the mood to drink water. The competition was already so intense. Why was his drinking posture still so handsome? Even his slender fingers seemed to be emitting light. They really wanted to lick the screen. The director turned the camera over to see Qin Mo's reaction. Unexpectedly, Qin Mo arched a brow, placing the bottle of water down. His right hand gripped the mouse once more, his expression indifferent. MMH. MMH? MMH. What did he mean by MMH? Zhao Sanpang wanted to roar like the Beast King. In the past he had always felt that Qin Mo was incomparably annoying. How could he still be like this after losing his memory? Wait a minute. This guy, could it be? Could it be? Zhao Sanpang's eyes widened, he sat down, caressing his chin with his fingers. Captain, I think Qin Mo is up to no good, do you think so too? Xiao Jing glanced at him, not beating around the bush, he simply said what he wanted to say. Qin Mo has recovered his memory. He's definitely recovered. That yes of his is almost on par with the sun. He was like that when he was competing with us. Zhao Sanpang said through gritted teeth. Goddess Luo cupped her face, looking like a love-struck fool. She only had eyes for Bojio. I think my almighty is the one holding back his naughtiness. Zhao Sanpang simply didn't want to bother with the fact that girls always looked at people's faces. There is itself to look at the figure. Who could be more muscular than him? He really didn't know how to appreciate. No one knew Qin Mo better than the three of them. However, in the eyes of many, the outcome of this match had already been decided. Supreme Alliance was just struggling. It was only a matter of time before they lost this match. Chapter 1371. At this moment, the audience seemed to have lost their confidence, all of them looking listless. Those who usually liked to play games were completely disheartened. Supreme Alliance's luck isn't good, they are always so close. Previously, Almighty Qin wasn't around, but now that he's here, he isn't of any use at all. In fact, it isn't easy to fight against a player like Yu Cixin. Even if Supreme Alliance loses, it's understandable. That's right, no one can avoid such a situation. Besides, they still have Hoshino, the godly jungle assassin. Now that Hoshino is here, it will be easier to kill Coco. Indeed, he can kill him in seconds, he can't even leave the tower. But it isn't like he didn't gain anything. Even if he lost, he would still be the runner-up of the Asian Cup. MMH, this result is actually not bad. It was as if they had already predicted the outcome of this discussion. But no matter how they looked at it, Supreme Alliance wouldn't win. Right at this moment. Suddenly, a crisp and childish voice came from somewhere. Why do you all think Supreme Alliance will lose? At the start, everyone was still looking for the voice. After all, they couldn't see the person and it sounded too young. When they saw the child wearing a cap sitting in front of them, they froze. What was going on? A primary school student was here to watch the competition? It was indeed a primary school student. She looked to be around 10 years old. Her facial features hadn't matured yet. Her eyes were bright, big and round, but there wasn't any emotion on her face. It was impossible to tell if she was a boy or a girl. What was most surprising was that there was a kid sitting next to the child who looked exactly like the child. F***CK twins? Mobe, I'm begging you, don't speak. If mom and dad find out that I brought you to such a place, they won't give me any pocket money next time. Do you know how important pocket money is at my age? I'll need it to get a wife in the future. The two kids were rather amusing. At such a young age they were already thinking about getting a wife. Unfortunately, as the elder brother, he couldn't control the other one. Haven't you noticed something? The child in the baseball cap glanced up. She wasn't old, but she had a maturity that didn't belong to her age. Almighty Z has disappeared from the Japanese's view for too long. Do you know what this means to an ace assassin? Everyone's interest was piqued. They felt that this child was indeed interesting and thought that he was teasing them. What does it mean? Master. The child's lips curved upwards. He looked rather handsome. Almighty Z's wilderness isn't for nothing. Hearing this, everyone laughed. How can you fight the Beast King at a time like this? The Japanese's economy is too high. If you go out alone, you'll definitely be killed. It's so dangerous. Before he could finish saying the word dangerous, a familiar dub came from the center of the arena. Along with the roar of a beast, it entered everyone's ears. The Master Buff has been eliminated by Spade Z. Everyone was taken aback. What followed was an uproar of excitement. Even Melinda didn't seem to expect this. She suddenly stopped broadcasting and looked at the big screen behind her. Spade Z killed him? It wasn't the Japanese who took it. Chapter 1372. Yes, how could this be? The players who were still discussing were all confused. They didn't know whether to look at the big screen or back at the child who made the prophecy. In short, their emotions were very complicated. Everyone who played this game knew that the killing of the Master Buff would allow the team to receive the help of the Flying Dragon. Whether it was to push the tower or create a team, there would be a relatively large advantage. The battle that was supposed to end like this actually had a decisive reversal. Mei Lin, who had just said that Supreme Alliance would never make a comeback, felt as though she had been slapped in the face. At this time, the foreign friends sighed with the audience and kept typing on the internet, "Cool." That enthusiasm was really hard to resist. That's amazing, I didn't expect such a reversal. What do you know, this is the strategy that the Chinese speak of, bang bang da. Because the first part was all English, the last sentence that popped out was a typo, which amused the group of foreign students. The foreign students were all smiling kindly. Brother, the Chinese is not bad, but the correct way to say it is bang da da, and mua da da. As Supreme Alliance fans, they definitely couldn't embarrass themselves at this time. In fact, Mei Lin really underestimated Supreme Alliance's influence. Some of the foreign students had been paying attention to Supreme Alliance because it was different from other teams. It might be easy to like a team. But no team would tell everyone that it didn't matter if the sky turned dark, it would always light up again. And no team would go so far as to trust each other and not abandon each other. So much so that they didn't hesitate to get involved in a case of copyright infringement. From them, you would understand a principle. Drinking ice for 10 years, it was difficult to cool one's hot blood. A man would die young. The international students took their time to translate some information about Supreme Alliance for their foreign friends and posted it online. Hey brothers, this is the real Supreme Alliance, everyone can take a look. Yes, this was the real Supreme Alliance. Just when everyone thought they were going to lose. They would always be able to reignite the fire and fight again. They would never resign themselves to fate. They were born to be human and any struggle was worth it. Even if so many people were saying that they would lose, they would fight to the last moment. Now, whether it was overseas or in China, there would always be some people criticizing the Chinese for being bad here and there. Perhaps this situation really existed. But it wasn't completely. If you don't believe me, take a look at Supreme Alliance. The shoutcasters were excited. No wonder Chinamo was able to do that. Chinamo? Wasn't it time to explain Spade Z's maneuvers? Melinda didn't understand and frowned. The shoutcaster's voice rang again. He has been circling the bottom lane in order to attract the Japanese's firepower. Hoshino must have reacted and wanted to head over to the Beast King's side. Chinamo set up an electric formation and flashed back. It wasn't a mistake, it was to buy time. When Zhao Sanpang heard this, he slapped his forehead and muttered to himself, "Sinister, too sinister." He acted as though he was about to lose and was still drinking water. In reality, he had already thought of a plan. Chinamo is really, just when people thought it was over, Chapter 1373. Gale. Gale. Someone died? Another Supreme Alliance member died? Who was it? The first thing they did was to look for Supreme Alliance's position on the map. But they realized that everyone had returned to the defense tower. No one died. Wait a minute. The person who died wasn't someone from Supreme Alliance. The person who died was someone from the Japanese? That was even more unbelievable. How could it be? Mei Lin didn't even bother to take the microphone. No one knew what had happened. The director quickly switched to the replay mode. That was when the audience saw it clearly. The angle that Qin Mo flashed back to was right behind the sorcerer. Even if the sorcerer saw it, he wouldn't be able to react in time. After all, sorcerers were naturally slower than assassins. Moreover, he had already used the flash, so he wouldn't be able to dodge Qin Mo's big move. On the screen, the flower of the sword fell with a silver light. After killing the person, it moved nimbly and returned to the defense tower. It only took an instant to complete this action. Therefore, even the audience at that point of view did not see such a scene, because most of their attention was on Hoshino. Even the Japanese's gazes were focused on the same spot. It was as though the more they guarded against the other party, the more they couldn't predict what the other party would do. Yu Cixin had thought of it, but the distance was too far. When he arrived, Qin Mo had already entered the defense tower. They watched the process of killing the person. The audience's eyes widened. It was as though he had charged into the crowd. At first they thought it was a technical error. But when they heard that the Beast King had been killed by Spade Z, they realized that Qin Mo hadn't made a technical error. He had been stalling for time. But no one had told them that Qin Mo's ultimate goal was to kill. If they had to describe it, he was like a swordsman who came and went without a trace. They had thought that he would be killed instantly when he entered the crowd. Unexpectedly, not only did that not happen, he even took the head of the other party. What kind of godly operation was it to be able to do that? But it was precisely because Qin Mo's landing point was too coincidental. Some people also felt that there was an overstatement of luck in this. For example, Mei Lin. After all, she had been watching the competition. From her point of view, even though the captain of Supreme Alliance wasn't bad, he was still lacking compared to Hoshino or Yu Cixin. How could he kill the Japanese? Mei Lin was shocked before she picked up the microphone. Everyone saw what happened just now. I believe the Japanese won't give Supreme Alliance any more chances. After all, they have to avoid such coincidences. Coincidence? What? The foreigners were a little confused. However, it was indeed too much of a coincidence. Let's wait and see. However, whether it was Melinda or some of the audience who did not understand the situation, they had all overlooked one point. Qin Mo didn't just take away a head. Supreme Alliance's sorcerer died twice. With a sweep of his long sword, the Japanese sorcerer died twice. The score became 3-4. Yu Cixin paused for a moment and suddenly smiled. Hoshino, it seems like your method of making people jealous is working. Hoshino still looked gentle. Indeed, but I forgot something. When someone gets jealous, he seems to be harder to deal with. There was no need to specify who he was referring to. An hour had already passed since the start of the match. But in terms of the number of kills, there was only a difference of one head between the two teams. Even Coco, who was standing in the middle lane, seemed to be playing better. The Japanese tried to ambush him in the bushes twice, but they didn't manage to do so. The next match. It seemed to have entered a tug of war. The clear troops pushed the tower. Supreme Alliance had the Flying Dragon, which could make up for the lack of defense towers. It also broke the Japanese's momentum. They had no choice but to clear the troops first. After all, this was a tower-pushing game. The final victory was still based on the destruction of the city. Of course, the situation wouldn't continue like this. If a sorcerer was killed, it would be too easy to imprison the Japanese. When the Japanese killed again, it happened at the bottom lane. Lin Feng was still holding the sniper cannon and rolling to attack the tower. He was always on guard against someone sneaking up on him from behind. He didn't expect the other party to never think about stealing. The tank came over. Yu Cixin gave him a marking damage. Before Yun who could protect him, Hoshino appeared. The moment Hoshino appeared, his extremely sticky crescent scimitar, once it hit the body, it would be very difficult to escape. Gale. Soon the score on the screen changed from 3-4. It became 3-5. Yu Cixin didn't even intend to let Yunhu go. He leaped over the tower with the tank. The sorcerer threw a freezing skill over and Hoshino's damage. Double kill. 3-6. Supreme Alliance was less than half of the enemy's number. They were behind again. It seemed as though killing the Beast King would only break the Japanese's momentum temporarily. But both Hoshino and Yucixin were monster-level players. Once they broke the rhythm of one wave, they would bring another wave out. It was easy to collapse against such people during a match. Most importantly, Yun, who had already died twice. On Supreme Alliance's side, everyone except for Bojio and Chinamo was left with one life. That was the most dangerous part. Lin Chintao couldn't take it anymore. He clenched his fists tightly. Every Supreme Alliance member had the same expression. The camera paused on them for less than a second. The shoutcaster suddenly said, "In reality, this isn't the best formation for Supreme Alliance. Everyone should understand now that Supreme Alliance is lacking a team controller. If Rao Rong had been in the middle lane, the outcome might have been different. Be it in terms of experience or judgment, he would have been able to play a crucial role. But if he wasn't used during the double, Supreme Alliance might have lost and there wouldn't have been a team battle. Hence, Supreme Alliance has no other choice. Given the current situation, they can only try their best to avoid a team battle. That's the only way." Supreme Alliance was once again in a deadlock. Mei Lin seemed to have expected this. Her expression was clear. "This is just as I expected. As long as the Japanese are careful, they won't be able to switch to the back row. As for the previous incident, it was just a small accident that didn't affect the overall situation. Supreme Alliance should have understood now." But the moment she had that thought, there was another commotion from the audience. Mei Lin's first reaction was to check the score. The score hadn't changed. The Tyrant King was also staying put. What was going on? Mei Lin wasn't the only one with this question. The foreigners who couldn't obtain first-hand information felt the same way. However, what was different was that they liked to see the Chinese team turn the impossible into possible. "Wait a minute," Chinamo sent out an attack signal. "Is he really going to fight now? This isn't the right time for a team battle." "I understand, Almighty Qin. If he doesn't stop the Japanese now, they won't be able to turn the tables. Am I the only one concerned about why Almighty Qin and Big Spade didn't appear in the bottom lane?" "No, Almighty Hoshino is concerned too. You saw the screen just now. He zoomed in on the small map looking for Big Spade and Almighty Qin. That was after they crossed the tower. I mean, what were Almighty Qin and Big Spade doing before that?" No one was able to answer. Because their attention was on the bottom lane. The sense of déjà vu came again. This was a huge move when they weren't paying attention. It was like a high-level magician performing a magic trick. The closer you were, the more you would miss something. When you came back to your senses, a miracle had already happened. Just like now. Who could tell them? Why was there only half a crystal tower left on the top lane? The bottom lane was basically cleared. That wasn't all. Supreme Alliance's super soldiers were attacking the tower. F***CK. Chinamo and Little Spade are really good at this. Zhao Sanpang started again. Sinister, really sinister. They even know this is a tower attack game. Two of the Japanese had returned to the city because they couldn't lose the last defense tower. If that was the case, it would be really dangerous. Fortunately, they arrived in time. But it was at this moment. Chinamo sent out an attack signal. "The troops are gone. Are they going to attack?" No, that doesn't seem to be the case. Indeed, that wasn't the case. Because of where he was hiding. In the bushes beside the Beast King. It was too far from the Japanese's defense tower. Is he trying to scheme? The shoutcaster guessed the truth. But at the same time, Yucixin and Hoshino could roughly guess it, so they didn't go over directly. Instead, they gathered their teammates and the four of them went over together. The other one stayed at the bottom of the tower to clear the troops, to prevent Spade Z from attacking the tower at this moment. The four of them came from four directions, but they didn't rush over directly. Instead, they formed a circle, exuding a faint sense of nervousness as though a battle was about to begin. And Chinamo was hiding in the middle of the four of them. According to the map, they were already surrounded by the Japanese. No matter how good his skills were, it would be hard for him to escape under such circumstances. The fans were worried. As the tanks came down from the top lane, they got closer and closer. The more they panicked, the more they panicked. They wanted Chinamo to leave quickly. Unfortunately, even if they said that, their voices couldn't reach Chinmo's ears. Chapter 1374. With that, she shook her head. But at this moment, no one cared about what she said. This was because the Japanese tank player had obviously moved his mouse a little, and the movement of his footsteps had also increased. He's coming? When everyone heard that, their hearts involuntarily tightened. On the screen, the Japanese's tank started attacking. He spun his body and jumped towards Chinemo. The sorcerer from the Japanese used his freezing skill at the same time. It was to control Chinemo so that he couldn't retaliate at all. But no one expected this. Just as the tank was about to spin over, Chinemo moved and raised his sword. The damage didn't hit the Japanese's tank. What a pity. The shoutcaster was excited when he saw this. But Chinmo's positioning is really beautiful. He wasn't trapped by the sorcerer from the Japanese, so he still has a chance of survival. It would be perfect if the attack just now had hit the tank. That way he would have a higher chance of escaping. From a professional point of view, it was indeed as the shoutcaster had said. But there was one thing. Chinemo had never thought of escaping. Shin seemed to have realized this too. The retreat signal hadn't been pressed. The sword light flashed across the screen. The king of the jungle was infuriated. Supreme Alliance's tank and sorcerer were all knocked unconscious in midair by this roar. In that instant, the shoutcaster's eyes widened. He couldn't control his guesses anymore. Was Chinmo's target from the start not the Japanese's tank but the king? The attack was just a matter of seconds. After hitting the king, it wouldn't just cause damage to the Japanese. Similarly, it would also cause damage to Chinemo. As an assassin, he had to make use of this opportunity to jump in and kill him instantly. But just as Hoshino was about to move, suddenly a long spear came over. It seemed to be able to bring out a sharp wind. It was Spade Z. Hoshino dodged instinctively. He dodged the attack. Although the spear did not cause any actual harm to him, it did not cause him any actual harm. But it was obvious that he had lost the best opportunity to attack Chinemo. So this attack wasn't 1v4 but 2v4? But even so, they had no chance of winning, right? It was obvious that Hoshino wasn't easy to deal with. Bojio could stop him but she couldn't stop Shin at the same time. As long as Shin jumped in, Chinemo would definitely die. From the looks of it, Chinemo seemed to be trapped in a corner. But just as Shin was about to move, a fan suddenly flew out from the bushes. That was Koko's skill. Slow damage. Why was Koko here? When did he come? Also, that skill was too accurate. I've always wanted to say, aren't you guys underestimating Supreme Alliance? Koko waved his mouse. The moment he released his skill, it obviously delayed Shin's movements. In other words, in less than a second. When Shin returned to the battlefield, the Japanese's tank suddenly realized that Chinemo had disappeared. The first skill was wall jump. In this way, all of the damage dealt by the Japanese landed on the ruler. After the aggro was full, the monster ruler raised his claws again and slammed down heavily, accompanied by a roar. Other than Chinemo, who had moved away, everyone's HP was reduced. The Japanese archer guarding the top lane saw this and wanted to come over to support after clearing the troops. But at this moment, Chinemo, who was standing in the bushes, rushed over. He wasn't heading towards the ruler. Instead, it was the long-range archer from the Japanese who rushed over to support. When the long sword swept past, it was not that the Japanese archer did not execute a perfect movement. The damage was off the charts, directly reducing half of Chinmo's HP. But when he saw the electric formation and wanted to flash away, it was too late. Because before he could press the mouse, the sound of a sword rang in his ears. 3 swoosh 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 swoosh. His HP was reduced to a critical level. The silver light fell, not giving him any chance at all. Chinemo swept his long sword and took the last drop of his HP. The Japanese's tank rushed over to support. After all, they guessed that Chinemo should be out of HP. But this guess was wrong. Because before the Japanese's tank could make a move, Chinemo disappeared in front of him again. A teleportation skill. Don't always think of using this move to win us. The Japanese's sorcerer raised his hand and used a freezing skill, throwing it into the bushes where Chinemo had flashed back. Everyone watched as Chinemo was about to be attacked. They saw Chinmo's hand holding the mouse suddenly move in a snake shape. The speed was so fast that everyone was stunned and sighed in disbelief. He could even dodge like this. That was amazing. Some old fans watched this scene and asked the people beside them, "Don't you feel that this Almighty Chin looks strangely familiar?" Almighty Chin is Almighty Chin, what's there to be familiar about? What I mean is, I haven't seen him play like this in a long time. Ever since he started as a team control, he has always been very stable. Of course, I don't mean that he isn't stable today, but, let me think about how to describe it. Alright. 3 years ago, when he first debuted, he played like this. It was as though he was fearless against anyone, no matter how many people there were. As long as the sword in his hand was still there, he could create an unimaginable miracle. It seemed to be responding to this thought. Everyone could clearly see it on the screen. Qin Emo turned and swept towards the Japanese's sorcerer like a gust of wind. The Japanese's tank wouldn't be able to provide support in time. The Japanese's sorcerer gritted his teeth, throwing out skills as he retreated. Hoshino wanted to go over but Bojio stopped him. Fortunately, Qin Emo didn't have a big move. That was the only thought in the Japanese's sorcerer's mind. But in the next second he realized he was wrong. He couldn't retreat because Qin Emo had hit the Beast King through the wall again. The moment he was sent flying. The Japanese's sorcerer heard the sound of the sword. Hurting the Beast King wasn't just to send him flying. There was another reason. That was the big move. Qin Emo was refreshing his big move. No, that wasn't right. He's also sucking blood. The shoutcasters widened their eyes. They had never seen such an operation before. Qin Emo casually swung his sword 3 times, but before the silver light behind him dissipated, he was already close to the sorcerer again. Such precise timing. The Japanese's sorcerer had fallen from midair and hadn't had the time to press his skill. The sword light was like silver, all hitting his body. The sound of the critical hit sounded again. Double kill. Double kill. Double kill. Under such circumstances he could still kill twice? From the interview video, the foreigners could clearly see the Chinese reporter, Mei Lin. At this moment, her hand that was holding the microphone froze. Even the corners of her mouth were stiff. The words that were on the tip of his tongue could no longer be uttered. Indeed, she couldn't say it. After all the drafts she had prepared were about how to praise the Japanese. Qin Mo's outstanding performance was already beyond her imagination. Besides, it wasn't as simple as a double kill. Including this time, the enemy sorcerer had already died 3 times. This meant one thing. The Japanese would be missing one person. But if the Japanese were such a sitting duck team, they wouldn't be called the Japanese. Very quickly, Yusishin returned the favor. With a wave of his mouse, he took Coco's head. This way the situation was balanced again. The Japanese's sorcerer couldn't fight again. Similarly, Coco couldn't fight again. The 5v5 became 4v4. But it was undeniable that in terms of the number of kills, the Japanese were still in the lead. Mei Lin looked at the 5-7 head count and laughed. It seems like Supreme Alliance performed exceptionally this time. But from the score we can also see that Supreme Alliance is still lacking if they want to win. However, the moment she finished her sentence, all of a sudden, another sound effect came from behind him. No one had expected this sound effect. But it was like a whirlwind that stirred up the entire crowd. Quadruple kill. Triple kill. Triple kill. Some fans even stood up in excitement. After all, how could anyone achieve a triple kill in such a situation? But this scene really happened. Even the director didn't expect it. He quickly cut to the replay angle. That was when everyone saw Yusishin choosing to attack Coco. Qin Emo used a displacement skill and jumped back to the Beast King's side. After 2 clangs, he flew towards the Japanese's tank who had less than half of his HP left. The tank reacted quickly, wanting to use the rotation of his body to lock Qin Emo in place. But he forgot that there was still the Beast King's buff. After the damage appeared, all of it landed on the Beast King. Qin Emo used this moment to sweep his long sword. Numerous rays of silver light landed behind him. The Japanese's tank operator and even his right hand seemed to be shaken. This person was really too fast. No, it wasn't just fast. His prediction and calculation. It was so accurate that it made people's hearts tremble. Logically speaking, his attack should have landed on him instead. How did it shift to the Beast King? He wasn't the only one who thought so. Even the shoutcaster was confused. This can be considered a bug in the game. It should be. There seems to be a godly analysis post that wrote about the bug in the game. But after the revision these things rarely appear. Wait a minute. What? That analysis post seems to have been written by Qin Emo himself. Even the shoutcaster didn't know what expression to make. Zhao Sanpeng's mouth fell open. After a moment of hesitation, he turned to Xiao Jing who was sitting beside him. Captain, do you think Qin Emo would make use of a small bug in the game? Xiao Jing didn't say a word, he just reached out and pushed his spectacles up his face. He looked as though he had silently agreed. F***ck, he is too shameless. Zhao Sanpeng's hair rose. As expected, Qin Emo doesn't have the most shameless, he can only be more shameless. No, it isn't over. Xiao Jing, who had been planning to remain silent, suddenly spoke up. Zhao Sanpeng was still confused. It isn't over? It was already like this and it wasn't over? What else did Qinemo want? Just as Zhao Sanpeng was thinking about this, another sound effect appeared in his ears. It couldn't be Qinemo killing again, right? Of course not. But other than killing, his sword could kill other things. The familiar dubbing and three-dimensional sound effects reverberated throughout the entire arena. A row of golden words appeared on a black background. It appeared on the big screen right in the middle. The Beast King has been killed by Qinemo, whoosh. This time it wasn't just a portion of the fans. Even Zhao Sanpeng stood up from his seat. *CK. How did he do it? At this moment, Goddess Luo held the side of her face and suddenly laughed. You shouldn't be surprised, wasn't he like this in the past? At least he wasn't perverted enough to kill the Beast King. Zhao Sanpeng was especially concerned about this point. Xiao Jing spoke again, his voice calm. There's nothing to be surprised about. That was his first year playing this game and now he has been playing for 3 years. In other words, Yu Cixin's previous moves were just his moves from 3 years ago. Qinemo probably wants to tell everyone this. Is that why he's using such a method to return the favor? Zhao Sanpeng widened his eyes for a moment before saying, this is indeed in line with his petty character. *CK, doesn't that mean he's even stronger now? Xiao Jing lowered his head and looked at his hand. It's a pity. Goddess Luo glanced sideways. There will always be a chance to fight with him at his peak. Yes, many people said that Qinemo was at his peak 3 years ago. Some even said that he was old and shouldn't hold on to the title of most valuable player. But the reality was, 3 years of accumulation. Apart from the helplessly failed time after time. More importantly, the famous sword that had been hidden for 3 years. One day, when it's shown again, it would definitely amaze the past. Mei Lin was expressionless now. Half of her face seemed to have been slapped red. What she said previously was really like a slap to her own face. The shoutcasters were a little confused. After killing 3 people, he was still able to get the Beast King's buff? How perverted was Qinemo? That isn't something an ordinary person can do, right? Nonsense, you can try snatching the Beast King with a bunch of people. You might not even be able to do it, let alone using such a method. Brother One, we are still commentating. Alright? What I mean is, to be able to do this, one must first have accurate judgment. Of course, hand speed is also important. The most important thing is the calculation between the moves. Who knows how Qinemo did it? Brother One. I misspoke again. Let me retranslate. Qinmo's fighting style is making my eyes dizzy. I need to wake up. Don't wake up. Hoshino seems to have gotten rid of Spade Z. His target is Qinemo. After fighting the Beast King, even with his lifesteal equipment, Qinmo's HP was low. Now Hoshino was here. Chapter 1375. Moreover, Yu Cixin was behind Qinemo. He had used up all his skills. He probably wouldn't be able to escape. But right at this moment, a ray of silver light flashed. It was the rifle in Spade Z's hand. The weapons clashed and sparks fell. Since she didn't have time to attack, she used her back to block the knife for Qinemo since she still had a lot of HP. At this moment, Lin Feng and Yun Hu rushed over after reviving. Hoshino's finger paused. He knew it wasn't a good time to attack. He glanced up at the opposite side. Then he and Yu Cixin retreated back to the tower. They were so fast that Supreme Alliance couldn't encircle them. But if Supreme Alliance retreated just like that, they wouldn't be called Supreme Alliance. They took advantage of the fact that the Japanese's tank and archer hadn't revived yet. Qinemo and Bo Jio were like 2 streams of air, skimming towards the opponent's jungle. Especially Bo Jio, she leaped over in just 2 steps. She first picked up the red buff and then skimmed towards the troops on the top lane. What was strange was that she didn't kill the small beasts at the side of the bushes. This doesn't seem like Spade Z's vision. What's going on? Some people couldn't understand. The shoutcaster guessed. Spade Z must have left the small beasts for Qinemo. Firstly, it would allow Almighty Qin to recover quickly. Secondly, it would make it easier for Qinemo to use his big move. Have they never thought of returning to the city to recover? Once he said that, Melinda realized something. Spade Z and Qinemo from Supreme Alliance had never returned to the city? At this moment, she didn't dare to make any further analysis. The foreigners were adorable. They had come with hope at the start, but now, they wanted to see Supreme Alliance's screen even more. At this moment, the audience realized something. Spade Z didn't kill the small beasts for more than one reason. She wanted to take down the entire troop on the top lane. Yu Cixin and Hoshino had realized this a long time ago. They had rushed to the top lane as fast as they could. But with the Beast Lord's buff and the help of the Flying Dragon, Supreme Alliance's tower attack speed was really fast. Even with Yucixin and Hoshino, the defense tower on the top lane of the Japanese was left with less than a third of its HP. At the same time, the middle, the bottom, and the other two paths were all taken down. Especially the middle lane, it was like a map. First it was Yunhu and Lin Feng. Then the two of them gathered together from the two jungles. They led the Flying Dragon to the last defense tower outside the city gates. However, there was one thing worth noting. The Japanese archers and tanks had been revived. Yucixin and Hoshino were there too. The flying dragons that Supreme Alliance brought along were all gone. Their speed was so fast that people could not help but admire the Japanese. Even at this stage, they could still pull the match back to a draw. No, that's not right. It wasn't just a draw. It was because they had an absolute advantage. Supreme Alliance had been focusing on the top lane and had forgotten what the bottom lane was like. It was only then that people realized that two batches of super soldiers had already arrived at the bottom lane. The red lines were hard to miss. When did this happen? The playback was played back. Only then did he get a clearer look. It was the cooperation of Hoshino and Yucixin. Very quickly, the news of Supreme Alliance's defense tower being destroyed appeared on the screen. A large number of super soldiers started to head towards the center of Supreme Alliance. F***Sika, oh no! Zhao Sanpeng was shocked. He even forgot that they were wearing earphones. He shouted, "Little Spade, what are you doing? Hurry up and return to the city, our home is going to be destroyed." Everyone who played this game knew that. In terms of the rules, it didn't matter how many died. The final outcome would be determined by the destruction of the city. Hence, this game tested the teamwork and battle strategy between teammates. Any carelessness and the tables would be turned. Mei Lin found another excuse. Supreme Alliance is too careless. Sometimes, Hoshino and Yucixin would purposely create an illusion to make the other teams lower their guard. It seems like the outcome of this match is set. Lin Feng is returning to the city. A voice came from the audience. But in the next second, his return to the city was interrupted because Hoshino had rushed over and his scimitar was right next to him. Lin Feng moved nimbly, avoiding his attack. At the same time, Yunhu darted over, using the stun skill to trap Hoshino on the spot. This is probably Supreme Alliance's first chance to kill Hoshino, the shoutcaster said. The shoutcaster added, but they can't make a move because once they do, there won't be enough time. Hoshino predicted this, which is why he rushed in. There are only two outcomes: either he dies in the team battle, delaying Supreme Alliance's time and Supreme Alliance's city will be destroyed, or he doesn't fight and his harassment will be effective. Supreme Alliance will have to send Qin Mo or Spade Z back. That will be their advantage because Supreme Alliance's city can't wait any longer. After he finished his sentence, there was indeed one less figure on the screen. It was Spade Z. She seemed to have pressed the button to return to the city the moment Hoshino rushed in. At this moment, she appeared in the middle of Supreme Alliance's city. The audience heaved a sigh of relief. That scared me to death. Any later and the crystal would have been destroyed. Thank goodness. Some patted themselves with lingering fear. But even so, Supreme Alliance was in a disadvantageous position. Because once Bojo left, the situation became 3 against 4. It was at this moment. The Japanese's tank turned and started a team battle. Hoshino, who was about to retreat, suddenly changed his route and once again headed towards Lin Feng's position. As a member of the audience, Zhao Sanpeng's expression changed. It wasn't just Zhao Sanpeng, even the usually expressionless Xiao Jing frowned at this moment. The shoutcaster pointed out the pros and cons. This is bad, Supreme Alliance might be wiped out this time. Before he could finish his sentence, Yucixin's figure was like an enlightened sword, marking the damage. No matter how accurate Lin Feng's positioning was, he wouldn't be able to escape. But just like what Coco had said, they had underestimated Supreme Alliance. Just before Lin Feng died, he released the last attack, reducing the archer who was walking over to a sliver of HP. This allowed Qin Mo to set up an electric formation when he neared. It didn't just slow down everyone's movements, it also took a person's head. 1 for 1. It had to be said that Lin Feng's positioning was beautiful. He circled the Japanese's archer. That person only realized that he had underestimated his enemy after he died. But this didn't stop the Japanese's attack. And there was one thing. The Japanese's archer had a chance to revive after he died. But Lin Feng was gone. Everyone was well aware of this. But compared to this, What they were more afraid of was the possibility of their team being wiped out. Because everyone knew that compared to the Japanese's archer, Shin and Hoshino were more difficult to deal with. Chinemo wasn't easy to catch. They landed all the damage on Yunhu. Yunhu didn't escape because he knew that the more he tried to escape, the more likely it was that he wouldn't be able to get anything. Since he couldn't escape, he would drag someone along. With that thought, he jumped with a big move. Out of everyone's expectations, he landed a wave of damage on the opponent's tank. Then he leaned forward and hooked Shin and Hoshino to his side. He had a stun effect around him. That was also in that instant. Chinemo used a skill to teleport back to the center of the battlefield, his long sword aimed at the tank who had less than a third of HP. Two Ks and Os sounded at the same time. Both Yun-Hu and the opponent's tank wouldn't be able to continue the competition, which meant that in the entire arena, there were only 5 people left. The Japanese had Shin, Hoshino, and the archer who was about to revive. Supreme Alliance only had Bojio and Chinemo. Most importantly, after Chinemo killed the Japanese's tank, Hoshino's machete had shaved off half of his HP. Moreover, Shin's skill had a marking effect. He couldn't avoid the opponent's big move even when he went into the bushes. This time, Chinemo won't be able to make it. Spade Z was still too far away. The minions had just been cleared. At this time, even if he jumped over the wall, he wouldn't be able to rush back. And Chinemo, who had less than a third of his HP, had to face Shin and Hoshino. Shui Yaoyao didn't dare to watch for a moment. Her fingers trembled as she closed her eyes. Just as everyone thought that the competition was about to end, Chinmo's figure suddenly disappeared in front of their eyes. That was a skill teleportation. It was as though ashes were suddenly ignited. Everyone sat up straight, watching the scene in excitement. Even the shoutcaster couldn't help but exclaim, "Beautiful!" But Shin couldn't let Chinemo escape just like that. He changed his direction and flew towards him. But Chinemo wasn't prepared to fight with him. His slender figure skimmed towards the bottom lane. Hoshino seemed to have predicted this. He was one step ahead of Chinemo and waited there. He was about to strike with his machete. Suddenly, another figure appeared in front of him. The long spear rose up and he was lifted into the air. It was Spade Z. No one had ever heard such intense tapping sounds from the keyboard. The two of them had the same hand speed and seemed to be on par. The machete met the long spear. Countless silver sparks were ignited. At this moment, the archer on the Japanese's side revived and fired a long-range cannon towards them. This cannon had a stun effect. Not only could it cause the enemy's HP to drop, it could also make them dizzy for a few seconds. Even Bojio couldn't avoid this move. Shin took the opportunity to use his big move to mark Spade Z's HP. 2 with low HP against 2 with half HP and the opponent's archer. Supreme Alliance was probably going to be wiped out. After all, Spade Z wasn't like Chinemo, who still had the skill to teleport. At this stage, the ending seemed to have been predicted. But no one noticed. Chapter 1376. Her hand speed was so fast that it was dazzling. No one could see what she did. They thought she was escaping. But the screen didn't show it. It seemed like it was too late to escape. Even when Chinemo turned sideways and used the sword formation to slow Hoshino down. But at this moment Shin activated his big move. A marked damage and the long knife went straight for Bojio. The figure in front of him lay down. The fans suddenly fell into silence. Even Shui Yaoyao's expression was blank. The current situation was already very clear. It was originally 3 against 2. If Bojio died, Chinemo wouldn't be able to hold on. If Bojio died, Chinemo wouldn't be able to hold on. Supreme Alliance was really going to lose. Even the shoutcaster felt regretful. He was about to take the microphone and make the final conclusion. Mei Lin said bluntly, "There's no need to continue fighting, even Chinemo can't escape." At this moment, everyone felt the same. But in the next second, the fans, who had their shoulders slumped, seemed to have been injected with adrenaline. They straightened their backs and stared at the screen. The figure that was lying down stood up again. Revival armor. Almighty Z used a revival armor just now. Ah. As expected of my big spade, you're so handsome. Melinda was even more stunned. After all, a resurrection armor would require a change of equipment. When did Spade Z show off her skills? Mei Lin didn't have a thorough understanding of Supreme Alliance. Did she really think that Spade Z had been playing at the side ever since the competition started? She wasn't called the FC King of Zone C for nothing. Chinamo seemed to have expected her revival. He didn't escape. Instead, he used a teleportation skill and flashed behind Yusishin. Wait a minute, Chinmo's HP is low. What else is he trying to do? What else was he trying to do? Of course he was going to fight. No one had expected such a move. Even Yusishin paused for a moment before turning around. But the moment he turned, Chinmo used another teleportation skill. Chinmo teleported again. After he disappeared from Yusishin's sight, he stood tall and straight. He held his long sword and stood in the bushes. Even his sleeves were fluttering from the wind from the sword. When people saw this scene, he really couldn't stand any longer. Because this scene was too familiar. They were so familiar with each other that even now, when they saw that action, their eyes would turn red from excitement. Even Hoshino realized something and was about to hit the person in the bushes. He moved agilely and waved his long sword. As the sword formation fell, 3 silver blades fell, and even his whole body was covered in silver splendor. Go. Yusishin collapsed. Even Hoshino lost more than half of his HP. 3,000 knife cuts, blood reverse kill. This was Chinamo. Hoshino didn't give him a chance to escape. The scimitar was about to cut off his last drop of blood. Right at this moment, Spade Z raised her spear. This time it wasn't to help Chinamo block the attack. Instead it was a big move. Everyone could clearly see the youngster sitting in front of the computer, waving the mouse with her right hand, thrusting her spear horizontally. Just as the enemy's archer was about to stun her, she quickly retreated. Just when everyone thought it was over, the youngster jumped over the wall and closed in on Hoshino from another direction. The young man leaped over the wall and closed in on Hoshino from another direction. Before the screen of silver light could disperse, the spear in her hand had already struck Hoshino's body. Even the white dragon's roar was left on the ground. The scene was so cool that no one could look straight at it. Hoshino's finger paused and then he smiled lightly. He had already predicted the outcome. I underestimated you, Z. But I can't leave by myself. With that, he turned around and used his scimitar to lock Chinamo in place. If it was him, he might not be able to bring Chinamo away. But the Japanese still had long-range attacks. The stun cannon shot over again. There was a loud bang. Go. 2 sound effects played at the same time. Chinamo raised his eyebrows. The dead Hoshino took off his earphones with a smile. Chinamo didn't take it off, his side profile was still handsome. His slender fingers tapped on his earphones, and he said faintly to the remaining figure of Supreme Alliance, "Take revenge for your boyfriend. Everyone, we really didn't expect Almighty Qin to have such a reaction after his death." Zhao Sanpeng's mouth twitched. F***CK, how can they be so lovey-dovey at such a time? I'm impressed by this shameless Chinamo. This is an international broadcast, is he trying to let the whole world know that he and Little Spade are a couple? Hoshino paused as though he hadn't expected Chinamo to say that. The fans at the scene exploded, holding onto their faces with their hands. Big Spade. Quick. Take revenge for your boyfriend. The shoutcasters coughed lightly. They really didn't know what to say. But the competition wasn't over yet. Whether it was Yusishin or Hoshino, they could still be revived. It was just 20 seconds, there shouldn't be any more problems. But the excitement of this team battle had attracted attention from both domestic and international audiences. Because there had never been anyone like Supreme Alliance, who was able to turn the tables in such a critical situation. This was enough to prove the strength of Supreme Alliance. But how was this enough? Spade Z, who had always been known for her speed, would definitely take this chance to counterattack. The shoutcasters, who originally thought that the competition was over, watched as Spade Z used a blue buff to drain 1/3 of her HP. Then she leaped over the wall and hid in the bushes. It was as if he was clearly telling everyone a truth. I'm going to take revenge for my boyfriend. MMH ambush and kill. The archer from the Japanese also realized that she was coming to kill him. Without any hesitation, he didn't even dare to stop, activating his sprinting skill to avoid the next attack. But the strange thing was no one came close. Was Spade Z still waiting for an opportunity? Or was she waiting for a big move? There were all sorts of guesses and they could almost imagine a big show. But what no one expected was that, once again, Spade Z didn't appear beside the Japanese's archer. She was on the top lane. There were 2 waves of troops on the top lane. With the shift of the camera, the audience realized that during the battle, the last defense tower of the Japanese's top lane was gone. Now, Spade Z was leading the 2 waves of troops directly towards the city center. The Japanese archer was confused, quickly pressing the button to return to the city. There was a hidden message. It must be. Chapter 1377. If the previous competition had been a competition of skills and judgment, then now it was a competition of time. Now it was a competition of time. The usually calm Japanese club manager couldn't help but stand up at this moment. Needless to say, all the fans who were watching this competition. Hurry, hurry, hurry. That was the only thought in everyone's mind. The Japanese archer's return to the city sign was still turning. He couldn't wait to appear in front of the Crystal City. He's here. The shoutcaster got excited when he saw the archer arrive in time. Right at this moment, Spade Z brought the troops to the center of the city. But it was obvious that it would be difficult for her to push down the city. It was simple. It would be difficult for her to attack the city with less than half her HP. After all, she wasn't a tank or an archer. She wouldn't be able to withstand such heavy damage, and she wouldn't be able to carry out long-range attacks. Moreover, Yusishin would revive in 12 seconds. Hence, it was best for Spade Z to retreat and wait for Chinemo to revive before fighting again. This was a thought that anyone would have. But that didn't include Bojio. Just as the Japanese were prepared for her to retreat, Bojio appeared. Everyone saw with their own eyes that she had taken advantage of the line of minions to sneak in, and with a flick of her spear, all the damage landed on the archer. Just for a moment. The archer was reduced to half his HP. How can she have such a strong destructive power? This was something that everyone was confused about. Logically speaking, Spade Z had already changed her equipment to a revival armor. The damage should have been reduced. Wait a minute, her equipment seems different from before. Indeed, it was different. But the main point was that no one knew when she had changed her equipment. Everyone's gaze landed on the youngster. Her silver hair moved slightly as she moved the mouse. But that was why her nose bridge was high. Even her side profile had an indescribable sharpness and handsomeness. Inexplicably, it gave people a sense of confidence. If it was her, she might be able to do it. *CK, look at her finances. From the start of the team battle, everyone had overlooked something. That was the comparison between their finances. Now they realized. Spade Z's finances were 2,000 more than the Japanese archers. She changed her equipment at the last minute and suppressed her finances. No wonder she could reduce the archer's HP by half in one move. And it was not over yet. Everyone watched as she moved sideways. Perhaps it was because her speed was too fast, even her body seemed to be able to stir up the wind. However, the Japanese archers were not to be trifled with. His opponent's HP was already low after hitting him just now. As long as he used his ultimate move, Spade Z was going to die. However, at that moment, everyone saw the young man move his mouse and draw a Z shape. His spear went up and went straight for the shooter's back. The cannonball was fired. But the target had disappeared. Not only that. More importantly, Spade Z's goal had never been to kill him. Because the spear was raised, she took advantage of the fact that there were only 2 tank soldiers left and directly attacked the crystal. Gotcha. Crystal's HP, which had been low to begin with, was now only left with less than half of its HP. At this moment, the Japanese archer realized that he had been tricked again. Spade Z had intentionally diverted his attention so that he wouldn't be able to clear his troops. Chapter 1378. He wanted to clear the line of soldiers. However, to everyone's surprise, Spade Z didn't give him the chance. She lifted her spear again. The dragon roared and only 2 words rang through the screen. Go. It was a different weapon, but she used the same tactic. Counterattack with low HP, 3,000 silver lights fell. Bojio didn't stop holding the mouse. 3 seconds. 2 seconds. 1 second. Just as everyone was wondering why she jumped in front of the Japanese spring. Yusishin was revived. He dashed out. However, at this moment, Bojio used her spear to block. What is Spade Z doing? She will definitely die. Indeed. Yusishin only used a big move to mark her. He would be able to kill Spade Z instantly. However, the moment his blade landed, a loud collapsing sound could be heard on the screen. Following the shattering of the crystal, each piece was like a piece of glass with a silver brilliance. Faintly, the chanting of the white dragon could be heard. Everything was still, including the movements of the hero that Yusishin was controlling. In the game, Bojio was still stepping on the silvery white dragon shadow that fell from her spear. Just like a youngster isolated. Swoosh. Countless 3D stereoscopic sound effects surrounded the surroundings. Two words appeared at the same time. Victory. In that second, the entire arena was silent. Their breaths seemed to be rushing through their chests. Their minds were still filled with the suppression of the line. They could even hear the sharpness that burst forth from the youngster's body, bringing with it a sharp light that swept through the army. Along the way, everyone's sadness and laughter stopped at this moment, until Bojio reached out to remove her earphones. Her lips were slightly curved. Deafening cheers rang through every corner of the bird's nest. We won? Feng Shang was still in disbelief. Lin Feng was the first to stand up. He ran towards Bojio, who was still sitting on the chair. This time, even though he knew that his captain was beside him, he couldn't control his hands. Even Coco and the others lifted Bojio up into the air. Bright laughter came, accompanied by unforgettable emotions. Everyone's reactions were the most realistic. In addition to the applause, the fans covered their mouths and their eyes reddened from being moved. Only those who had traveled together with him would understand. It wasn't easy. It would be great if they could win. A fan whispered, "Sister Turtle, I want to cry." "Idiot, why are you crying? You should be smiling now." However, when she said this, the voice of the businesswoman was hoarse. "Can you understand? One day we let the tears break the dam. It wasn't because she was sad. It was because he was touched. Because at this moment, everyone standing in front of the screen was witnessing their glory. Many people still remembered it." Chapter 1379. As the victorious team. The 3D screen would continuously replay the team's name, including every exciting scene during the competition. The first time they showed their brilliance in the city competition, the continuous counterattacks against the top 8 teams in the province, and the national qualifier where a slender figure stood in the arena in a daze after losing, his head lowered. The revival match that shocked the industry, the national qualifier where they didn't give up. The only place they could sleep was in the internet cafe when they were insulted so badly that they didn't feel safe. Or the way they stood in front of the camera, never shifting their gaze away. And now, the performance of the Asian Cup. The familiar IDs of Supreme Alliance flashed past their eyes again and again. Along the way, everyone's sadness and laughter were imprinted in everyone's hearts as they moved the mouse. At the end of the scene was a calm voice that made countless fans scream. "I am the captain of Supreme Alliance, Qin Mo Whoosh." Countless people stood up. The MVP of the match was still Qin Mo. When Bojio saw the announcement, she felt that she had finally fulfilled her wish. That person wasn't pulled down, he was still standing in his position, and this time, she was beside him. Qin Mo noticed her gaze and tilted his head, chuckling lightly. "Do you like to watch that much?" MMH. Bojio's mood was bubbling with happiness, but she wasn't sure what the Almighty was referring to. Qin Mo's voice was still calm. "Hurry over." Bojio didn't intend to stay far away from him. It was better for her boyfriend to stand as close as possible. Qin Mo saw through her thoughts. The corners of his lips lifted, making her feel a hint of sweetness. His smile was successfully captured by the camera. Hence, the entire country. Oh no, the entire world was caught off guard and fed a mouthful of dog food. What else could Zhao Sanpeng say? He was so handsome and considerate, but he didn't have a girlfriend. How could Qin Mo, a stinky man who didn't understand a girl's heart, smile like that? Humph, he would never admit that he was jealous. They followed the procedure. The two teams wanted to greet each other. Then, Supreme Alliance went up to receive the award. The two teams stood in the same position. The captain faced the captain, and the vice-captain faced the vice-captain. It had to be said that the Japanese were probably the team that lost the most gracefully, because there wasn't even a trace of embarrassment on their faces. On the other hand, the club's manager was on the verge of breaking down. He did not pay any attention to the interview. Until now, he still did not believe that their team would lose. Not to mention Mei Lin, who was already dumbfounded. She had come specifically for the Japanese and had previously stepped on Supreme Alliance. How was she going to salvage the situation now? Yu Cixin brought his team members over and stretched out his hand. His face was handsome and devilish. Even his voice didn't change. "We'll fight again next year." Qin Mo replied faintly. The relationship between the two of them could not be considered friendly. Even though they were all very polite. Hoshino's side was different. He didn't shake hands. Instead, he leaned forward and did something that no one expected. Chapter 1380. Bojio lifted the corners of her lips. "Hoshino, thank you." Such words could only be understood by companions who had the most tacit understanding with each other. Hoshino smiled, his words filled with a hint of blackness. I really want to know Qin Mo's expression now. Lin Feng wanted to shout at the side. You aren't the only one who wants to know, I want to know too. But I don't dare to look. What a hero. Since you dare to hug little spade, almighty Hoshino, I, Lin Feng, respect you for being a man. Thinking of this, Lin Feng stealthily shifted his gaze. As expected. The smile on the captain's face was cold. His face didn't turn black, but anyone who saw his devilish smile would feel a chill down their spine. Lin Feng was afraid that his captain wouldn't be able to control himself and would kick him. After all, regardless of whether it was in the game or in real life, their captain's fighting ability was something no one dared to challenge. The entire Supreme Alliance seemed to be able to imagine the scene of a huge vinegar jar falling to the ground. Surprisingly, Qin Mo didn't stop them. After the two of them hugged, he reached out to hold her wrist. When he brushed past her, he threw a sentence at Hoshino. You won't have another chance. Regardless of what it was. Hoshino thought about Qin Mo's reaction. The only sentence he didn't think about was this. It was a little heart-wrenching. But it was probably because he didn't want to be that person right from the start. That was why he felt that it was fine. Qin Mo didn't care about other people's opinions. But he respected her completely. That was Z, the young lord of the hacker world who had saved him from the whirlpool. How did she make it here? He knew it better than anyone else. This was probably the only thing he wanted. Hoshino turned, his gaze landing on Qin Mo's back view. The moment the thought came into his mind, he heard a voice. Are you still watching? Aren't you leaving? Was Yu Cixing? He was smiling, but there wasn't any warmth in his eyes. He wasn't in a good mood. Why was he hugging someone who had won? Yu Cixing pursed his lips, walking in the opposite direction. The audience couldn't see the invisible surge. The only thing that could be seen was the hug that he did not expect. The crowd exploded. He hugged. My almighty Hoshino is so strong. He's not afraid at all. I'll bet 100 yuan that almighty Qin will definitely get it back from Big Spade at this hour. I'll add 100. I've been a fan of almighty Qin for so long, I know him better than anyone else. Do you still remember the photo of Lin Feng trying to win Big Spade's heart? I used to be naive and didn't understand the subtleties, but now, I'm completely jealous. Almighty Qin will definitely say, come, let's have a good talk. Just thinking about it makes me want to have a nosebleed. How cute. I didn't expect there to be so many hidden sweets to eat. Watching the interaction between the two, the CP fans' hearts were about to explode. The competition was good, and after the competition it would be even better. The ticket was worth it. Coincidentally, Qin Mo turned to the left and said something to the youngster. Both of them were dressed in Supreme Alliance's uniform, their figures tall and handsome. This scene revealed a sweetness that she had never experienced before. Many fans couldn't help but take out their phones to take photos. They looked at it every day and felt sweet in their hearts. Chapter 1381. Qin Mo asked, how do you intend to explain your cheating incident tonight? Bojio choked. Brother Mo, isn't your definition of cheating a little too hasty? You're not allowed to have any opinions. Qin Mo tugged her, domineering and childish. As expected, he was jealous. Bojio couldn't help but laugh. When Qin Mo saw this, he held her hand and squeezed it, signaling her to behave. The interaction was too subtle. But it didn't pass the fans' eyes. But before they could see enough. On the other side, the Asian Organizing Committee walked out. According to international practice, the winning team would stand on the highest podium. But in reality, it wasn't important. The most important thing was that at this moment, the flag of China was flying in the sky. It was the color of blazing flames. The 11 of them lined up in a row. At this moment, they looked more like youngsters who had grown up on this land singing the same song. Every man had a long-cherished wish in his heart. They could either be a soldier and protect their country. Or, he could appear on the international stage and let everyone in the world see the national flag that was raised in their eyes. Because this was the only way to win more respect. This was their original intention. It hadn't changed over the years. Regardless of what they had encountered. The magical thing was, when you see the flag rising, your insides will become hot and soft. Regardless of what they had encountered, they would only feel glory at this moment. Even if this profession wasn't understood, it wasn't important anymore. It was just as the introduction said. They had once fallen into a bottomless abyss. Now they were determined to make a comeback and establish themselves as kings. The 11 of them appeared on 32 mainstream media outlets, 64 live streaming platforms and even foreign magazines. Of course, Bojio and Chinemo took up the most space. But no one knew. At this moment, the bunch of people who had just received their awards didn't have time to browse through Weibo, magazines or media outlets. They had wanted to celebrate. They reached Yin Wuyao's internet cafe. They didn't know when this group of people started to like to gather on the second floor. It was probably because the sound of the keyboard felt real. It's an occupational hazard that makes me speechless. Lin Feng's self-evaluation was accurate. But it didn't affect them at all. Feng Yi knew that they needed a breather. Other than the interview on the national channel, he avoided everything else. He ordered a lot of food and drinks and brought his assistant upstairs. But when he really went up to the second floor, he found that no one in the group was awake. He didn't drink. He just sat there and fell asleep. Everyone was very intimate. Coco and Feng Shang's heads were touching, and their bunnies were hanging on the ground. Perhaps it would be difficult for outsiders to understand. But as Feng Yi's assistant, he wasn't surprised at all when he saw this scene. Because she knew. This group of people was too tired. Any industry related to the internet was different from other ordinary industries. The pressure was great. Another public figure. He had to pay attention to his every word and action. Even if it was ordinary words, they would be misinterpreted by others into another meaning. Some people thought that they liked her, but it had already made them breathless. Insomnia is the norm. Many times. Feng Yi was even more afraid that someone among them would have psychological problems. Chapter 1382. Feng Yi glanced at the few of them and lifted his chin towards the little assistant. The little assistant understood and immediately placed the things on the table. She raised her hand and adjusted the temperature of the air conditioner to the best. The weather in the north was especially cold at this time of the year. No one knew when it started snowing outside. Feng Yi glanced at the calendar hanging on the wall. He hadn't expected the new year to pass so quickly. Both Little Spade and Uncle Ian had been here for a long time. Since the competition was over. It was time to find something for them to do. At the very least, he had to be the face of Supreme Alliance so that he could lure the newcomers in. After all, he was a businessman. The corners of Feng Yi's mouth curled up. He was back to being the smiling fox manager Feng. The little assistant shivered at the side. She felt as though her days of working overtime were coming back. Even so, when they left they closed the door carefully. But Chinemo had already woken up when the door was pushed open. He had been too lazy to get up since he was carrying someone in his arms. As for who he was carrying, there wasn't a need to elaborate, everyone knew. But very quickly he kissed the person in his arms awake, his breath by her ear. His voice was calm. "Are you pretending to be asleep because you're worried I'll settle the score with you?" Bojio trembled from the kiss, opening her eyes. "Brother Mo, let's not talk about such an unfriendly topic when everyone is asleep." "Tell me what topic is friendly." Chinemo smiled, reaching out to push her hair to the side. His long legs were wrapped around her long hair. They could lie down horizontally but Chinemo was too tall, so he had to lean sideways. Bojio's arms were still around his waist. No one knew how comfortable it was to hug the Almighty to sleep, hence she had taken advantage of him when no one was paying attention. But now it seemed like this position was disadvantageous to her. But long before she came she had thought of a strategy. "For example, let's talk about the other reward you promised me." The two of them always seemed to fall in love in a different way than others. Chinemo glanced at the person who was raising her eyebrows at him. He reached out and pinched her face. "Keep your claws. If you want a reward, get it. Don't do anything bad." Bojio watched regretfully as he pulled her hand out of his uniform. The Almighty was always so prideful. As his girlfriend, she couldn't even touch his abs. Without any bad things to do, Bojio could only lie there lazily. She looked like a hedonistic young master raised by a family, but she was a little listless. "You look like you're not interested in the reward I'm giving you?" Chinemo pinched the face again. Bojio replied seriously, "I don't show my emotions on my face." She was afraid of digging up her dark history. "Not bad, you are very calm," Chinemo said slowly. Bojio found the Almighty's attitude strange. After all, no matter how she looked at it, it didn't seem like he was going to give her a reward. Instead, it seemed like he was trying to trick her. Chinemo suddenly said, "Wait a minute." Bojio was confused. "What?" Chinemo stood up from the sofa, standing sideways. Just this alone made him look suave. It's not here, it's in the pocket of my jacket. Bojio paused, her hair sticking up as she stood up. Her handsome face looked a little cute. Was there really a reward? It wasn't a dark history? Chapter 1383. Chinemo knew that someone would be curious. His lips curved upwards as he allowed her to follow him casually. Bojio wasn't afraid since it wasn't her dark history. Chinemo swept her a glance, his smile deepening. He held onto his jacket, his long legs leaning against the wall as he hooked his fingers in Bojio's direction. Bojio walked over. What is it? Chinemo lifted his chin, gesturing for her to reach into his pocket. For her to take it herself? Her interest was piqued. She reached her hand in. The moment she saw it, her ears drooped. It was the photo that had been placed in the villa. She knew she had a boyfriend like the Almighty. She couldn't rely on him to give her a diamond ring. The Almighty's favorite thing to do was to dig up her dark history. She would have to find time to ask her fans in the future. What should she do if her boyfriend had a special interest? I'm waiting online. It's urgent. Even though it was fun to watch the Almighty speak viciously about his childhood because of jealousy, it wasn't good. However, it wouldn't be good if he recovered his memory. What would they do then? That would be another dark history. Bojio made up her mind. Before the Almighty regained his memory, she would explain everything clearly. Chinemo saw that she didn't take the photo out and had a helpless expression on her face. He suddenly pulled her over and lightly touched her face with one hand. Are you an idiot? Take it out and flip it. What else could there be in a photo? She couldn't flip it and turn it into a ring. Bojio paused, her gaze landing on the back of the photo. There was a line of beautiful black letters. It wasn't long, just 7 words. You are the joy of youth. You should know what it means when you read it backwards. Chinemo lowered his lids, the lights falling. The night sky outside the window seemed to have become a foil for him. In that instant, it was as though all that was left in her ears was a flowing voice. It wasn't loud or soft, but it was full of substance. The youngster I like is you. It wasn't an ordinary confession. Otherwise, it wouldn't have appeared at the back of the photo. Bojio tightened her grip on Chinmo's sleeves, the thought rushing through her mind. Chinemo smiled, planting a kiss on her forehead. It's me. That one word explained everything. The Almighty had regained his memory. All of his memories. Bojio didn't know how to describe her feelings. Her mind was blank. She reached out and hugged him without a word. This time he really was hers. From the inside out. Completely and utterly. After the joy, there was a muffled voice. You didn't even reply to the letters I wrote to you. Chinemo tucked her hair behind her ears. It's my fault. At that time, I sent them every day and I even wrote a lot of wrong words. Grandfather Butler laughed at me for a long time. Chinemo sighed. That's why you wrote the letter. Why would a small hacker write a letter? Bojio felt that she had been too immature back then. The television series caused me trouble. They say that letters can make people feel sincere. Now that I think about it, emails are the most reliable. At least when you read it, it will appear as read. Even if you didn't look at it, I know you didn't receive it. MH, you aren't that stupid. Chinemo couldn't hold back his smile as he listened to her soft complaints. Bojio paused. Wait a minute, this wasn't the right topic. She was the one who mocked the Almighty. You're tuning in to the Han Lee's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.